Well, thank you for being here this morning. As I look out across the room, you should take a minute to just look around. Go ahead and do that. Just look around at who's all here. We got a lot of good people in this room, and a lot of smart people in this room, for the most part. I'm Mayor Paul Haken, and I want to welcome you all to our first, hopefully annual, Sioux Falls Housing Summit. This is an event that we kind of have had in the works for a little while, and is something that we're going to try and utilize to elevate the dialogue in our city around housing. And if I can tell you about the genesis of this a little bit, when some of you, a lot of you, have seen this and heard of this already, what we call our One Sioux Falls framework for our administration. And this guides a lot of the decisions we are making in the city right now. Doesn't mean if something doesn't fall into this framework, we don't do it. But I will tell you, we give a lot of priority to things that do fall within this framework. And you'll see one of the core tenets, we call it, of this in the lower right, is what we're calling accessible housing. And I will tell you, as part of a program that I got involved with in the city early on with Bloomberg Harvard City Leadership Initiative, it's called, I've got the chance to work with 39 other mayors from around the world and understand their problems and their challenges in their communities. And it's been an unbelievable program for me personally, but for the city of Sioux Falls. And we're able to share challenges and best practices, and quite honestly, it's a little bit lonely in the mayor's chair, and so talking to other mayors who are going through the same thing has been very therapeutic for me. And I will tell you that housing is probably the number one challenge of those 40 mayors around the world. Yeah, I don't know if that's good or bad, but we all have the same, the point of that is we all have the same challenge. It's not just a Sioux Falls challenge. I would actually say, and you may disagree with me, but I will say when I compare us to peer cities, and I compare us to non-peer cities, San Jose, Seattle, Miami, Charlotte, these are some of the mayors that are in my cohort, they have our challenge times 100 in some of their housing challenges. But when I took office, I wanted to make a commitment to housing and say, listen, we're not going to treat housing as a kind of a bolt-on issue. It's going to be one of a handful of core issues we're going to tackle. So the first thing we wanted to do with that was determine what does housing look like for our city departments. Where does housing live in the city? How do we treat housing? We have a housing department. You're going to get to meet some of those folks in a little bit. It was traditionally called our Affordable Housing Division. And I have found over not only my year in office, but the year before of campaigning, people don't want to live in affordable housing. They don't like that term. And neighbors, businesses, other homeowners don't want affordable housing next to them. And that's just the fact of the matter. Okay, we talk about the NIMBY, not in my backyard mentality. Everybody wants affordable housing, but they want it out by Wildwater West, or they don't want it by them. And we have to shift that mentality and that dialogue to not have the word affordable housing be a negative moniker. So we have started calling it accessible housing. And I know to a lot of you in the room, I'm looking at Denise, when we talk accessible housing, we're talking ADA access, right? And yes, to you in the know, that's what that means. To Joe Public, the word accessible means attainable. Because we don't just have a problem in Sioux Falls with what I'll call affordable housing. We have challenges of housing, okay? Everywhere from homeless teens, so we have VOA building a home place project on the west side of Sioux Falls for homeless teens, to move up homes in Harrisburg in the south end of town and the northwest part of town. So we have housing crunches across the gamut. So I don't want to say that we have just an affordable housing problem in Sioux Falls. We have housing challenges. Thus, the renaming of our affordable housing department, the housing department in Sioux Falls. And we have a housing manager in Shelly Unruh, who you're going to meet today, not an affordable housing manager. And the task of that department under her leadership has shifted. The new mandate of that department is, don't just manage programs and HUD dollars, come up with innovative housing solutions for the city, of which HUD dollars and those things may be a part of that, but there may be other things as well that have no federal funding that we can do to continue to grow housing in our city. So I want this room to know that our administration has an extreme commitment to this, but I will tell you that this is not a problem or an opportunity, I'll call it, that the city of Sioux Falls can do by ourselves. Thus, the bringing together of all these people. We're going to require some creative housing solutions from all the smart people in this room. And what I mean by that is, we have had builders, we have had developers approach us and say, listen, Sioux Falls has been good to me. I want to help with this challenge. I know there's a problem. Do you know that if you would change this ordinance or change this zoning requirement, we could do this and this and this? Yes, we would make less margin on it, but it's the right thing to do for the city, and you guys should consider that. We are open to those discussions. We're open to those ideas. So rather than waiting for the city to say, this is what we're going to do to change policy, to enact ordinance, to change the way we're doing platting fees, whatever, to make things more affordable, we're very open to ideas from the smart people in this room, things that you think would work in our city. Some of you have heard the story of a guy that I talk about a lot named Kent, he was my first really introduction to how difficult housing can be in this city. And he's a guy, a homeless guy that I met about 5 or 6 years ago, that I met, befriended him, was on disability, made about $800 a month on his disability, and he couldn't work. I mean, he was in rough shape. And when I found out he was homeless, shortly after meeting him, I said, dude, we got to find you a place. Let's go. And we drove around for a day in the city. I'm like, I don't know how to find housing, so we'll start driving around. I think I know the places that would be affordable. We went to 3 different motels that you guys, I would dare bet, would never stay in. All of them were full. You know, they were anywhere from $800 to $1,000 a month. But they were filled with people who either had felony records, couldn't get housing anywhere else. And these were some rough places. We went to 3 of those. We went to 2 apartments that, again, they were kind of sketchy places. And they were all full. And we finally found a place for Kent. And they needed first month's rent, they needed a security deposit, and they needed a credit check. So I'm looking at Kent, and it's like strike 1, 2, 3. You know, so what I ended up doing, and this is not a solution to the problem, but I signed my name on the lease. I gave the first month's rent. I'm not saying this to be like an attaboy, but I'm telling you this is what had to be done. I gave the first month's rent. I put down the deposit. I said to Ken, listen, you get paid the first of every month, you get that disability check. You're going to come to my office and you're going to count out $480 the first of every month. And the minute you're late on it, that becomes my apartment. My name's on the lease. So he's taking his $800, shelling out $480 in cash first every month, you know, which leaves him $320 to live off for the month. And he did it every single month for 6 months. He came and did that. To the point then where the apartment owner finally had enough confidence in him to say, okay, we'll renew your lease, and now your name can be on the lease. You've proven you're a good tenant. You pay on time because you paid to him, so I could vouch for him and say, the guy will pay. But man, was it a challenge. That's how we had to get this guy a place. And he didn't even have a felony. He didn't even have any record. He just was a homeless guy who was an addict, another issue, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, today. that created living challenges for him. So I have some personal experiences of why this topic is so important to me. Because as I talked about in my State of City address yesterday, this is a commonality with those other 40 mayors as well. They can relate. They say, well, Paul, we all feel like we're living the tale of two cities. So you go to the chamber events. Sorry, Jason Ball. I know Jason's in here. You go to the chamber events. You go to Development Foundation events. You talk about growth and business and economic development and keep Sioux Falls moving ahead. And we are. And we're focused on that. But that comes with this stuff, okay, that we don't want to talk about as much. Narcotics, housing needs it, increasing number of felons coming out of the pen who need housing. Some of those challenges that aren't as fun to put in your CVB guide, but have to be talked about when you're growing this. In that balance, you have to continue to strike in this position. And that's a real challenge. That's a real challenge we face as we grow by 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 people every year. We have great things happening, and we have an increasing number of challenges happening. A lot of that starts with housing. And housing is a basic element of life. I mean, if a child knows they have a nice place to live, they have a roof over their head, they know the water's going to work, they know their electricity won't go out, they have access to the internet, they're going to be better learners. They're going to have that stress level reduced because they know at the end of the day they got a place to go to. Better learners create better students. Better students create better future workforce. And a lot of it starts with housing. If you were a kid and you were going to school and you're worried about what you're going to eat next and where you're going to stay that night, or what's going to happen in your seedy apartment complex that night because of something that happened the previous night, what an incredible level of stress for kids to have. And that's also why this topic is so important. So I'm really honored that we have this size of a crew here for this. I'm really looking forward to the discussions today. I want to thank you for making the commitment to come to this. There's some boards scattered around that you've seen. There's some in the back, and there was some when you walked in. We want to make this interactive, and we want to have some collective kind of groupthink on solutions and ideas that you think the city can utilize to move the housing discussion forward in Sioux Falls. So that's all I'm going to say to kick off the day. Someone that we're very lucky to have in the city of Sioux Falls is our Chief of Staff, Erica Beck. Because when you talk about housing, you talk about development, you talk about zoning, you talk about all the nerdy stuff that goes with planning and development and ordinance, we have the LeBron James of that stuff here in the city. She's been a tremendous blessing to our city. We wouldn't be moving ahead on a lot of these items without her expertise. So I'm going to turn it over to her, and I'd ask that you welcome Erica Beck to the summit today.
It's pretty bold to refer to LeBron James as nerdy, but we'll go with it. So again, as the mayor commented, my name is Erica Beck. I have the opportunity and the pleasure of serving as Chief of Staff in his office. I'm going to reiterate some of the same things that he said this morning. But first and foremost, I just want to sincerely thank all of you for spending your time here with us today. It's incredibly important to us that we have this type of group and this makeup of group in the room today to help us address this topic of concern. The mayor stressed yesterday in his State of the City address the importance of engagement. Engaging the public is important to everything that we do in city government and as a city in general. When we talk about increasing engagement and increasing the engagement of our community, we aren't simply talking about pushing out information or holding meetings. We're talking about elevating the level of conversation to generate greater impact for our community. That means a two-way conversation and an iterative process to solving challenges, finding efficiencies, and creating opportunity. This engagement is exactly the purpose for today's Housing Summit. Since I started in my current role last June, it has become increasingly clear that as stakeholders in the housing industry, we are not all connected or in the know on the good things that are being developed, implemented, and executed around Sioux Falls. This year's summit will create a foundational base of knowledge for all participating stakeholders to work from in developing a strategy to comprehensively address housing needs in Sioux Falls. The summit will focus on providing a forum in which all of you can reconnect, bridges can be built, partnerships explored and formed, and efficiencies created. Carrying the development of a comprehensive housing strategy forward following today's event will be critical to both our short-term and our long-term success in addressing this critical need in Sioux Falls. Our housing team, which is led by Shelley Unruh, will use their many years of past experiences in the realm of administering federal housing funds to identify gaps that exist within the community, as well as new programming that can be piloted to fill these gaps. So at this time, and they don't know this yet, so bear with us here, at this time I'd like the housing team to come forward, if you would be so kind. Our housing team is incredible, and they have many years of experience under their belts when it comes to housing, but I can say for a fact that not all of you in the room know who they are. So if you're here today, Shelley, you too, everyone in the back, I'd love for them to introduce themselves to this group, this audience. Shelley's going to provide a mic, and just tell this audience what it is that you do, because ultimately, moving forward, the development of this housing strategy, this team of people are going to be empowered to work with all of you as stakeholders to do this. So if you would be so kind as to introduce yourself for the audience, that would be fantastic.
Good morning and welcome to the summit. I am Shelley Unruh, Housing Manager for the Housing Department at Sioux Falls.
Hi, I'm Claudia Bear. I'm the housing accountant.
Hi, I'm Seth Peterson. I work with the single family rehab, the emergency mobile home, home builders repair affair, and
Diane DeCoyer. I work with housing and neighborhood services.
Good morning, Brent Tucker. I administer the neighborhood revitalization program for the city of Sioux Falls.
Good morning, I'm Al Rutger. I'm the Housing Compliance Coordinator for the City of Sioux Falls.
Good morning, I'm Lisa Fuller and I am the Housing Technician assisting anyone and everyone.
Hello, I'm Matt Cerny. I work with the single family rehab, our rental rehab program, and also our emergency mobile home program.
Hello, I'm Bruce Smith. I work with the single family rehab program, the emergency mobile home program, and with Habitat for Humanity.
Thank you. Just want to say thank you to this team because they are responsible for setting up today's event, and they will be working on expanding the programming that we offer at the city moving forward based upon what it is that we identify are gaps that need to be filled by all of you. You're the experts in the room when it comes to housing within Sioux Falls and the region in general, what our needs are and how we can best meet those needs. So today, I really look forward to hearing from all of our panelists, and I hope you do as well, because they're going to talk about what their current market trends look like. They're going to address potential opportunities that we as a city can be involved in helping meet the demands of, as well as all of you. So thank you very much for the opportunity, Shelley, to address the group this morning, and I look forward to speaking with many of you throughout the day. Thank you.
So I want to take a moment and draw your attention to the packet that you have in front of you. In the packet, you will find a wealth of information, including one of the ways that we would like to interact with you today. So while we're having our panel discussions, hopefully some of the questions that we are going to be starting the conversation with will spur ideas or questions within you that you would like to pose to the panel. The way that you can do that is through this app. So we're going to be using an interactive app today called Slido. So if you have your cell phone out, you'll want to get that out, go to slido.com, and you will navigate to the opportunity where you can enter in the passcode that says Housing Summit. Through that app, then, we will have interactive polls that you can participate in, but you can also submit questions that I will pose to the panel once we roll through some set questions that we have created to lead that conversation. So this is a interactive way that you can participate in that dialogue today, and we hope that you will utilize that to really pose some questions and opportunities to our panel. We also have notebooks for you to jot down ideas so that you can share those with us. And like Mayor Tenhaken alluded to, we also have idea boards on the back where we have posed some questions, and we would like you to provide your feedback with ideas, solutions, questions. We have Post-it notes with markers where you can write down your ideas and stick it right to the wall. We have polling questions out in the lobby. So this is really a great opportunity for you to engage with us. Also in your packet, we have the Your Feedback card. This is an opportunity that if you want to be involved going forward in this continued housing discussion, we will be looking to continue this dialogue after the summit, and we will be reaching out to folks that want to stay engaged and help us really put together a comprehensive plan for solution-focused plans for housing. So if that's something that you're interested in, please fill out that comment card and drop it off at registration with one of the housing specialists that you just met. In addition, you will have a brochure in your agenda packet about all of the housing programs that we quickly introduced with the housing staff. So you can learn a little bit more about the programs that we facilitate through that. And then also you will have an agenda in there that will give you brief descriptions on every one of our panelists, as well as our program for today. So at this time, we are going to start our first panel. The first panel is going to be a discussion on education and awareness on recent initiatives with the Sioux Falls housing industry, and I'd like to welcome up our panelist speakers for that. So I will take a moment then to introduce to you our panel. First, we have Cindy Dannenbring. She is the Executive Director of Interlakes Community Action Partnership. And she has been with Interlakes since 1993. She began her career with ICAP in 1972 and has served in positions in fiscal administration and offices of the organization since that time. Immediately prior to her appointment as Executive Director, she served as the agency's Deputy Director. Also with us is Rich McCorris. Rich is the president of Kingdom Capital Fund in Sioux Falls and serves as chair of the board of directors for the Sioux Falls Ministry. He's leading an effort through the Ministry Center to bring renewal to Pettigrew Heights through Housing First initiative. They currently have purchased and renovated 5 properties in the area. Rich is also overseeing the construction and management of tax credit apartment complexes. He also serves on the board of directors of Compassion Childcare and the Sioux Falls Hope Coalition, both which directly serve low-income families in Sioux Falls. Nate is with the Community Outreach. He's the program manager with Community Outreach. He started Community Outreach in August of 2018 and helped initiate and launch the organization's housing ministry, the Hezekiah House. Prior to joining the Community Outreach, Nate was a pastor at the Ransom Church and also worked with IT project management at Avera. His experience with managing and leading projects, also ministering to others, has been greatly beneficial to his role at Community Outreach and leading the Hezekiah House pilot program. I'm pleased to welcome Chris Stout from Kansas City and co-founder of the Veterans Community Project. Chris previously worked at Kansas City nonprofit connecting veterans to veteran-specific resources. Chris has helped launch and develop the program from infancy. Chris served in the U.S. Army with the 82nd Airborne Division. He was deployed to Afghanistan in support of Operation Enduring Freedom. While on deployment and out on a mission, Chris was critically wounded, resulting in his medical retirement from the Army. Chris has served and volunteered with a number of veteran organizations in an effort to improve the lives of veterans moving forward. This year, Chris was named the 2018 CNN Hero Top 10 for his work and service to his community. Last but not least, we have Darla Van Rosendale. Darla is the CEO at Dalrymple Village. Her 21 years at Dalrymple Village includes 6 years as CFO prior to becoming CEO. She has over 25 years of accounting management experience and was accounting manager for John Deere Company in South Dakota, Iowa, Arizona, and California for 13 years before coming to Dalrymple Village. She received a Bachelor of Arts degree in Business Administration from the University of Sioux Falls and her associate degree in Computer Science from National American University in Sioux Falls. Please help me welcome our panel. So at this time, we would like you to take out your phones and participate in our polling question to begin our discussion. So the question being posed is, how many agencies in Sioux Falls provide housing services or assistance? It looks as though many of you may have read the Thrive study on housing. And if you did, the correct answer is 23. According to the Sioux Falls Affordable Housing Needs Assessment that was conducted in 2006 by Sioux Falls Thrive and Augustana College, there are 23 individual organizations directly related to housing programs and services in Sioux Falls. So I'll start the panel with a series of questions, and if you'd like to ask the panel a question, you can submit that question through that Slido app. And once we get through the first round of questions, then we will begin taking your questions at that. Questions will be selected at random through that Slido app. If you see somebody that has already posed a question that was going to be similar to the question that you were going to ask, you can like somebody else's question, and that will indicate to us that that's something that we should probably ask. So please use that app as a way to interact and engage with the panel. So to begin our discussion, Rich, I'm going to start with you. What are the most significant challenges that have occurred in the City of Sioux Falls housing market over the last 3 years?
All right, good morning, everybody. From our perspective and experience over the last 3 years, I think what we're seeing in Sioux Falls is what we're seeing across the country as well, and that's in the middle class area. The rich, to put it simply, the rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer, the middle class is getting pushed out. And specifically in Sioux Falls, I think where we're seeing the challenges in the 60% to 80% average median income area, it's getting more and more difficult to find truly affordable housing for that specific demographic of people. And those that are in that 60 to 80% average median income area are beginning to have more financial struggles as well due to health care, other things like that. And so I think if you're in that area providing services to 60 to 80% average median income families, there's a big strain there and a real challenge for how to provide truly affordable housing to that group of people.
Thank you, Rich. And Nate, would you like to address that same question? From your perspective, although you've only been in the position just a short time, what have you seen have been some of the challenges in the Sioux Falls housing market?
All right, is this on as well? All right, so the community outreach, we kind of recently launched 2 new housing programs, one last November, one earlier this spring. So we haven't had even a full year yet to kind of see some of the different trends, but something that we definitely have noticed is just the demand for housing. We've noticed that Sioux Falls has been growing and still is growing, and so that just makes housing, let alone affordable housing, even harder to find and to be placed into. And so with that, finding creative ways to find housing for those who might be a little bit more difficult to achieve by themselves is part of the programs that we are working on to address that.
Cindy, I'd like to pose that same question to you then. What are the most significant challenges that have occurred in Sioux Falls housing market over the past 3 years?
Hey, at our agency, a couple of the programs we operate are our own house, rapid rehousing, and Bright Futures. In those programs, we serve homeless families with children. For that population, again, it's similar to what Nate said, to find housing that's affordable for much lower income folks is difficult. In addition, Many of them have some criminal background, nonviolent, and we respect drugs, to be honest. Lots of use, some misdemeanor, some felony. Either way, it's getting harder to find properties that will accept those folks. So those are a couple things that we struggle with.
Darla, how about you? Can you also share from your perspective what some of the most significant challenges are that we've faced in the housing market over the last 3 years?
Sure. Can you hear me? I represent more of the senior living and those residents of Sioux Falls with disabilities, and we find a challenge in the growing need. The baby boomers, who I am a part of, so I talk about them very respectfully, have all of their lives pushed the bar in changes in what they want to see, and we certainly see that in senior housing. How do we keep changing to meet those demands? What they want, what they need, but also the numbers of people that seniors will be serving over time. I think the other challenge that we all face is finding the right staff to provide that quality of service and quality of care here in Sioux Falls.
I know that Mayor Paul Tenhaken had alluded this morning that Sioux Falls is not the only city that faces challenges. So Chris, could you tell us a little bit about some of the housing challenges you've seen in Kansas City over the last 3 years?
So I serve the veteran population specifically. So I work with a lot of people that are on fixed incomes. And the other piece is a lot of those people that are on fixed incomes are struggling with the same issues, the criminal records to get in. I think that the struggle is for a lot of people, especially, this is probably my 6th housing summit this year, and I hear the same stuff across the board. It's just removing the barriers to serve the people. And if you can create these entities that will either help fix the barriers that are there, do some corrective action, or create the entities that'll serve them just straight out the gate, then I think that's the issue.
Thank you. I'd like to know specifically, how has housing challenges directly impact the demographic that you specifically work with through your programs? Darla, can you please tell us how that's affected the senior population?
Yeah, the challenges for us having to provide more services, new services, develop new services to meet their needs. Our biggest challenge is really educating people on what senior housing is. Senior housing is really serving anyone 55 and older. It's gotten to be a very broad category for housing, and I use the term seniors with people 55 and older very respectfully. It's a term of prestige. Our seniors here in Sioux Falls have helped make the city what it is, have helped bring so many organizations to Sioux Falls to serve us. And so it's developing the right services to meet their needs and educating people on what are the 55 plus communities like, what are the 75 plus communities like, and what services do they have to offer. It gets a bit overwhelming because there are so many choices and options, and so educating them is an important part of that.
Great. Cindy, can you tell us about families and how housing challenges affect our families?
Well, again, for them to find a place to live. And many times our staff, we have housing stabilization coaches. Case management is an integral part of both Bright Futures and Heartland House. Develop relationships with landlords. And because of the strong case management that goes with the programs, that sometimes opens some avenues that landlords will give the people a chance to come in and prove that they can be a worthy tenant. So again, it's some communication and relationship building with landlords that helps us to get our families in appropriate housing.
And Chris, I'll ask you, how have veterans been impacted?
For the demographic that we serve, right, what we see a lot is that they will get into a unit and then they'll be evicted, and usually the same owner owns 4 or 5 of the major buildings within a town, and it's a struggle to get them into the next appropriate place. You know, I think that in general veterans have a benefit, right? They have this fixed income. About 90% of the people we serve have a fixed income. So it's not necessarily that piece. It's kind of the bridges they've burned along the way that prevent them from moving forward. And then I think once they hit that point, they're afraid to ask questions and ask for the assistance that they need. But I think it's that, right? You see these individuals that are kind of like the affordable housing people, right? They own all they're either the single company managing all the properties in town or a single company managing all the apartment complexes, and they just can't get back in.
Thank you. I know that each of you deal in a very specific niche within housing here in our community and in Kansas City as well. So would you please tell us in about 2 minutes or less about the specific programs that you do serve, the clients that you operate, challenges, and then also success and opportunities that you've seen. Nate, I will start with you.
Right, so the community outreach, we have been able to launch and assist in launching 2 different housing programs this past year. As we've mentioned, one of them is Hezekiah House, and I'll say that again because most of the time when I say that, people kind of give me an interesting look. It's called Hezekiah House, and when you hear Hezekiah House, it is one of our home ownership programs. And essentially, we're trying to walk alongside families who are trying to take that next step of self-sufficiency. So they're a family who might have a good renting history, but because of just different financial hardships or just the financial hardships to purchase a home, we walk alongside them. It's a 3-year program. It's a partnership through Our Savior's Lutheran Church and Real Property Management Express. The church has offered to let us use their properties to place families into these homes, and they'll be paying rent throughout those 3 years. That first year, we have them focus on our Genesis mentoring program, where they will get paired with a mentor or mentors, and they walk them through a financial literacy curriculum. And so it focuses on goal setting, creating a budget, budgeting, and debt management, really to try and establish the finances so that as they're journeying toward homeownership, they can have that budget in place and be prepared. That second year, we focus on homeownership skills. And so with that, we will have them take classes at LSS, their homeownership class, through the Sioux Empire Housing Partnership, applying and having them take homeownership classes there. And really, those classes are designed to equip them with the knowledge to know how to maintain a home. They'll be able to learn the ins and outs of that home buying process, and also just different maintenance things to be aware of as they journey to become a homeowner. The last year is focused on kind of just partnering with different lenders and real estate agents. If they don't know of any lenders or real estate agents, we hope to refer them to different partners we have, specifically those who might have a certain niche with lending to those who are either first-time home buyers or for those who are more lower-income families. And so with that, the 3-year program, if they complete all their classes, if they complete all their meetings with the Genesis program, we actually return up to 50% of their rent that they've been paying for those 3 years, and we give that to them specifically to use as a down payment on a home with closing costs. And so it really helps kind of close that gap, that financial burden that a lot of families who might be paying their bills on time, they might have a good renting history, but they don't quite have enough to save for an emergency fund, let alone save up for a down payment that's often needed for purchasing a home. So that's our Hezekiah House, our home ownership program. There's another program that we've been part of being able to launch with. Sioux Falls Thrive has a housing action team with different agencies and organizations that have come together, and we've partnered in the way we're trying to rehouse those who are very difficult to house. And that could be because of a criminal record, as we've mentioned. It could be because of poor renting history, whether they have an eviction or some property damage on their record. And additionally, maybe it's just poor credit. So trying to rehouse those, and that's kind of through some of those relationships with landlords, as you mentioned. And how that works is the community outreach, what we kind of bring to the table is we offer case management, monthly home visits with those tenants, in addition to them going through our Genesis program, which I mentioned earlier. With that, additionally, ICAP has partnered in the fact where they're offering some of the guarantee fund for the landlord. That way, if there is a worst case scenario, these might be classified by the property owners as more high risk, that there's some financial incentive for reimbursement for rent and or property damage, depending on the situation. Also, we have the Helpline Center Network of Care. They've kind of offered a database where we can kind of help track what landlords are part of the One Roof program, how many units they have available, the rent amount. And so us three different and other agencies have come together and kind of helped initiate this pilot program called One Roof. So that might have been a little bit more than 2 minutes, but yes, we have One Roof and Hezekiah House. Right now for One Roof, we have about 4 families in it. We had our first family move in February, and the most recent one moved in last week. So we're going to be learning a lot and seeing how it goes. For Hezekiah House, we currently have 5 families in that program.
Thanks, Nate. Rich, can you tell us?
I'm going to go controversial right off the bat here today. I think over the last couple of years, the niche that I work with, lower income families across the board, the biggest issue is the spread of income-based housing, the spread of lower income housing across the city. I think we can all agree that we don't want all of the low income people in one neighborhood in the community. Nobody wants that. However, at the exact same time, there are challenges that come when we spread it across the community. And from my perspective, not to be too critical of past leaders or current leaders, our city wasn't prepared for the spread. So for example, I wish the conversation that's happening about transportation and the bus work that the innovation department is leading right now, that conversation should have been happening 3 and 4 years ago. In Sioux Falls, we don't have one place that employs all the lower income. It's spread throughout. And so now you're seeing nonprofits having to set up mobile things all around the community. Our nonprofit community wasn't ready for the spread. Our school district, again, this isn't popular to say, our school district wasn't ready for the spread. Go and talk to a teacher that's teaching at John Harris, at other schools, that those schools didn't have the in different income levels that they have now. There wasn't conversation between the city, school district, and county on how to maintain that and how to do that appropriately. And so again, don't hear me saying, oh geez, Pastor Rich wants us to put one neighborhood. Oh, I'm not saying that. I believe we need a good strategic plan as a community for all across our community of all income levels, but we've got to break down the silos between the school district, the county government, the city government, and then some nonprofits and businesses as well.
Thank you, Rich. Cindy, can you please tell us a little bit about your programs?
Okay, so Heartland House and Bright Futures. They're both programs that serve homeless families with children. Heartland House is specifically for families who are literally homeless. It is HUD funded. Bright Futures is funded through the City of Sioux Falls, was community development, now through the housing department. Bright Futures was an extension of Heartland House. We had so many on the waiting list for Heartland House that there was a need, and that need was met, not totally, but we did receive some funding to help us serve more families. In both of these programs, the families pay 30% of their income toward their rent. The balance is through a rental assistance. The families can find a home, an apartment, anywhere in the community that would work for them. However, that apartment must meet housing quality standards and it must not be over fair market rent. We encourage the families to look for apartments that are close to public transportation, because that is vital to them to be able to move around this community for work, for getting their children to childcare, for other things that they need to do in their lives. Most of our families, when they come in, do not have transportation of their own. They must use the public transportation system. So I am also pleased that the city is looking at the public transportation system to accommodate as many people as possible. The families then are required to participate in case management. Now, case management is really the integral piece of this program. The case management is what causes the family to develop a roadmap. We have 5 housing stabilization coaches. Those coaches work with 110 families currently. And by the way, there's about 130 families on the waiting list for this program. Those 110 families then develop a housing stabilization plan that is their plan. It's an individual plan. Most of the plans, though, include acquiring a full-time job, planning for attending tenant education classes through Fair Housing Partnership, making appointments with their caseworker. And it can be a multiple of things because it's individualized. It's their plan. Our coaches then, what they do in case management is help that family traverse through their plan. And if that plan needs to change, they help them in changing it. They give some guidance, they give some options. We can't do it for families. Many families are successful, but there are families that aren't successful because it's required that that family make some kind of change. If they want to move from homelessness for them and their family, something has to change or they'd be happy staying homeless. So that's not a condition, but something that just has to happen. It also demands some self-discipline. When the program works, it's a beautiful thing. When a family that has been homeless sees the light in some respects, and in some cases even becomes a homeowner. We've worked with Habitat with some of our families. It's a really good thing. Both programs are permanent housing programs. They are not transitional housing. So once that family finds a place to live, they can stay in that property. They go through our program, but as their income increases, their rental assistance decreases to the point they're able to pay their rent on their own. And that's the goal, is to have them be independent. So that's what we work with.
Great, thank you. Darla, can you please tell us about your programs?
I'm with Dalrymple Village, and we serve the seniors primarily in that 75 and older population. We are a life plan community offering independent living, assisted living, memory care, and skilled nursing care all under one roof. And that's for us a niche of having all of those services under one roof where residents living there can visit a spouse or a family member or a friend within the campus without worrying about going outside with inclement weather or in the middle of the night if they want to visit. And so that's a niche for us. We have 290 apartments. We serve a little over 300 seniors at Dalrymple and employ about 180 employees. We're the largest life plan community or senior community in Sioux Falls, but there are a lot of communities. We're only one of 2 life plan communities that offer all levels of care, but many offer 1 or 2 levels of care. And so it's a growing, certainly a growing housing here in Sioux Falls with all of the different senior communities. There are also more and more communities serving 55 and older. We've seen the apartment style living for some time and condo style living, and now coming up in the very near future, some cooperative buildings that will be coming to Sioux Falls serving those 55 and older. So new housing all of the time. I think one of the biggest challenges, and we've already heard it several times this morning, is that affordable housing. That's certainly a challenge for us. In the senior living with assisted living and nursing home, residents of South Dakota have a Medicaid benefit offered to them. Finding enough Medicaid beds in Sioux Falls can be a challenge because of the low reimbursement rate in South Dakota, and so offering Medicaid becomes a challenge for communities like ours. When you're losing money off of the Medicaid services, that means the others living in those communities, especially as a nonprofit, have to pick up that. And so Medicaid reimbursement is a big challenge for us. And then here in Sioux Falls, it can be a challenge to find a rehab center or nursing home bed if you've been in the hospital and need rehab. The growing demand for that is also somewhat of a challenge here in Sioux Falls.
Thank you. Chris, can you please tell us about the Veterans Community Project?
So Veterans Community Project, or VCP for short, it's a veteran-run organization. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. I think what we're most commonly known for is the tiny houses. So we build communities of tiny homes for veterans. Currently we're in Kansas City, and we're set to finish our 49th house on the same 3.1 acre piece of property. come October. We currently have 26 residents there. We're working in Longmont, Colorado, and set to move dirt on that property in August. And we're also working in Orlando, Florida, and by the end of 2019, we should be moving dirt out there as well, but it's a new model. So what VCP does in general is we provide transitional housing for veterans, for homeless veterans. We have two types of tiny houses. We have a 240 square foot house, and then we have a 320 square foot house. The 320 square foot house can fit up to about 6 people. So that we call that our family house, if you will. The housing, I like to tell people the housing is a very, very small piece of what we do, because coupled with our communities, we provide what we call outreach centers, and that serves every veteran in the community. And that's where we'll come into a community and create these partnerships. So if you take Kansas City, for instance, I mean, we do information referral, housing placement, job placement, free legal services. We have a food pantry, clothing closet. Basically, the building is designed to say yes to whatever they need when they walk in the door. One of the best programs that we're able to kind of really steamrolled what we do is we partner with the local transit authority, and we've already done this in Colorado as well, but where veterans can ride for free. We're kind of the gatekeepers of that program. I like to tell people it's the biggest bait and switch thing that we do, right? We trick them to come in for a free bus pass, and then that's how we're able to start providing all these supportive services. Because the reality is not everybody needs a tiny house. Not everybody is suited to live in a community like that. Some people are more appropriate to go into group living. For us, it's being the subject matter experts in those areas and connecting in with those resources. We're a true social service agency that uses housing as a way to supplement what we do. Because for us, a lot of veteran programs that are out there, if you take SSVF and these other community-based programs, they're one-time use programs for vets. And for us, the goal is to be out on the streets, under the bridges, in the woods, connecting with the people that need these services, and hopefully getting to them before they use those one-time use programs, preparing them to transition into those so that they can thrive and be successful. By the end of 2019, so that's transitional housing. So we do transitional housing right now in 2 communities. By the end of 2019, we'll be doing permanent supportive housing in Orlando. So we're looking to do about 140 houses on 1 acre, or 1 piece of property. So in short, we're the tiny house guys. We're one of the first communities to be inside city limits, connected to city sewer, infrastructure, all the above across the country. And that was done through a true partnership with the city. Because at first they were like, oh, we don't want tiny houses, right? That whole not in my backyard thing, we always get that. But like, listen, we got to come to some sort of agreement, because tiny houses are the most cost-effective thing to house people in. Like, if you look at the price per door across the board, for us to build a home, it's right around $8,000. You know, now it's because we're a nonprofit and we have partnerships, and traditionally, you know, it's about a $60,000 house if you're just to build it outright. But because we do what we do, we're able to house them much cheaper. And we wouldn't have been able to do that without the city partnership. You know, the city provided us the land. They gave us a little bit out of their public improvement fund to do the infrastructure, and then we came in and did the rest. We did everything going vertical. So that's it, VCP.
Great, thank you. I'm going to do a couple more questions, and then I'm going to start taking questions from the audience here. But Rich, you talked a little bit about how different stakeholders need to come together. So from your opinion, how can stakeholder groups such as developers, nonprofit, government agencies work together to eliminate housing barriers?
Great question, and I think there's a great opportunity here of nonprofits, business, development, and the city coming together, and I'll go controversial again and throw out a crazy idea that I think is critical, and that is the best way we can partner together is through a centralized intake system for anyone that's not participating in market rate rent. So for example, I know that regulation's not a great idea all the time, and I'm not a big government regulation guy, so don't start putting that the headlines. However, my perspective is if there's individuals that are receiving government benefit either through property tax benefit or tax credits or anything like that, should have to participate in a centralized intake system for any residents they have that are not participating in market rate rent. I believe one of the biggest challenges for families that are not paying market rate is navigating the system And so I believe actually it would benefit developers, businesses, nonprofits to share an intake system for families and individuals that are receiving subsidized rent. I realize that's a heavy lift and it sounds like an absolute nightmare, but I believe it would end up benefiting everybody involved. And I believe developers and business people would end up making more money at the end of the day because there would be a centralized intake system.
Cindy, I'm going to pose that same question to you. How can stakeholder groups such as developers, nonprofits, government agencies work together to eliminate housing barriers?
Well, one idea would be, and I neglected to mention this before in terms of challenges. A couple of other challenges for families that we serve is that they come with poor credit. You know, when a landlord would run a background check and check their credit, it's not good. Or they have a history of damage. Well, when that person has a case manager, housing stabilization coaches, we call them, it gives some assurance to that landlord that somebody's watching over that situation even though that person has bad credit. We can serve 110 families right now. That is a drop in the bucket to the number of families that are in Sioux Falls, that are in tax credit properties, in other affordable housing venues that could benefit. The family could benefit from, I'm going to use the word case management here first, and the property owner could benefit. But it wouldn't have to be to that extent. If there were housing service coordinators in some of the affordable housing complexes that could just give a little bit more attention to those at-risk families, it would diminish the potential of damages and the turnover that ultimately happens because of evictions. So that's something that I had thought about.
Nate, I'm going to pose that same question to you. How can stakeholder groups such as developers, nonprofits, and government agencies work together to eliminate housing barriers?
And so with that, I mean, both of our housing initiatives are through partnerships. And those just happened because individuals came together, they collaborated, and we partnered together for our Hezekiah House. We're partnering with a church and also our property management. Some of those things that we would be ill-equipped for, just as the eviction process if necessary, or even the maintenance issues on some of those homes. Real Property Management Express kind of has that portal set up. They kind of take care of the rent. They take care of, they have the maintenance connections. And so we've just realized there's not one agency or organization that can address every single need. And so we've been able to partner just with others to kind of create innovative solutions where we can all pool our resources together. Same with One Roof. We can, as I mentioned before, we provide that case management, the Genesis program, and ICAP provides the guarantee fund incentive for the landlord. So it's really that collaboration, that partnering, and kind of creating new, innovative solutions.
Great. Cindy, Darla, how can stakeholders such as developers, nonprofits, and government agencies work together, in your opinion, to eliminate some housing barriers?
As I mentioned earlier, I think it's education, and I'm going to preface that with a little history of Dalrymple. We've been known for having to educate because we were the first retirement community in Sioux Falls. There were nursing homes 56 years ago, but no other formal type of senior living. We were the first to offer independent living apartments on a senior community, the first to have a Main Street concept with shops and businesses brought to our campus, the first with a pool and a wellness center, and now most recently the first to offer a higher level of assisted living care in our memory care. So we've had to educate people on what those changes mean. As this industry has grown, it's very gray between differences between independent living and assisted living, memory care, and skilled nursing. And so it's overwhelming for people first to know what services, what cares do I need, or does my loved one need, and secondly, who has those to offer. And so educating people and having one central resource that people could go to be able to learn what all of those services are would be helpful.
Chris, you've had some experience then in partnering together. Can you dig a little bit deeper into that for us about how you've brought stakeholder groups together, developers, nonprofits, and government agencies to live in those to eliminate those housing barriers?
Yeah. To be quite honest, Veterans Community Project wouldn't be in existence today if it wasn't for those partnerships. I mean, if you look at the Kansas City model, we bought probably an $80,000 piece of property for $500 from the city land bank. It's traditionally unheard of. Then we had some sewer issues. The city was able to step up and use public improvement funds. There was a reason that property sat vacant for 20 years, by the way. That's the reason they sold it to us for $500. But the city stepped up, and through every council district, they were able to provide us some public improvement funds to help address that sewer issue, realizing that we will serve veterans from every area. And then one thing I haven't shared is we take no federal dollars. So we get no HUD money, no VASH dollars. We don't take vouchers, right? People stay at our properties at no charge. So had it not been the communities, the banks, those community reinvestment funds, all that stuff, we wouldn't be here today. I mean, we're rolling into our 4th year, and as a nonprofit, kind of growing from a bar or my kitchen table, right, to where we're at now. I mean, we're doing about $25 million a year in private fundraising per site, and that's all done through connections with the city kind of moving us and telling us to link up with this developer. One of the things that we did in Colorado, because most people are like, why are you going to Longmont, Colorado? If anybody's ever been there, you realize it's a really small town, and they have insanely expensive homes there. It was never on our radar. There's this developer that he's doing a 65-acre development, and he's got about 500 houses going in there, ranging from the $800,000 mark down to about $450,000. So very high-end homes. Out in Colorado, one of the things that the city did to kind of help assist with the affordable housing thing is they placed an Affordable Housing Act. So depending on how many new developments come in, a portion of it, and to theirs it's about 32%, right? Because they have such a high need. So this formula, and I'm probably oversimplifying it, right? But they've created this formula based on the houses, the property value, how many they're doing. And so it was going to cost the developer about $22 million to put in the affordable housing piece, right? That cap out at the 60, AMI, right? Well, they went to the city and asked, well, what if we do something specific to veterans versus trying to kind of mix it in and spending all that money. So they carved off about 4 acres for us. The developer did. They're building our 25 houses for us at no charge. The whole project for them is costing them about $3.5 million versus the $22 million. And then I think the biggest benefit to them outside the cost savings was the city was so excited to have us come in and kind of address the homeless issue and provide these services, the wraparound services, that the city made a commitment to us, and anything that we present to them with planning and zoning, we were guaranteed a 21-day turnaround, which is traditionally unheard of in any community you go to. I mean, you can go to the smallest community. I mean, it took us 4 years to get to the point where we were building in Kansas City, where we were going vertical, and in Colorado, from first time we met with city council to when we go vertical will be just at 13 months, which is insane. The benefit to the builder was that their first phase of the project got attached to ours in the planning and zoning, so they got the same 21-day turnaround. So not only did they save the millions of dollars by putting our project in that addresses the veterans homeless issue, but then they also are able to start selling houses in about 18 months from time of inception of the planning process, which I think is pretty uncommon across the board, because they have another development they've been working on for over 3 years, and they're not going to be building houses for another 8 months after that. So I think that it's truly, I think it's getting creative and making it an incentive for the builder, and I think the organization as a whole has to add value to the community, right? I think the idea is to serve the people in the most appropriate way, and what we try to do is we try not to duplicate services, and I think that's how you gain the community support and create that partnership. a lot of our referrals come from the VA, people that the VA can't serve, or Salvation Army or Catholic Charities, like these larger groups, because they've exhausted that or they can't serve them. But we're also now at the point where we're sharing funding. You know, they're referring grant people to us and things of that nature. So it's truly, you got to be everybody's friend on the street. But I think ultimately it's getting creative with how you do it. You know, in Florida, we're getting about 12 acres, and it's a partnership through the city. The city said, here, you can have it. We're trying to revitalize this community. We are one of the only organizations that came in and have brought homeless people into a neighborhood and it increased property value. So there's 8 properties that are surrounding us, 2 apartment complexes, organic tree farm, whatever that is, and storage facilities, all this stuff, right? We came in, we bought this property that was probably valued at $80,000. Fast forward a couple years, it's now worth nearly $2 million. Because we do what we do, we took a building across the street, we rehabbed it as well. That's where our community center is. And it had some environmental issues. It had been sitting on the market for about 3 years. And again, through public-private partnership, because we're a nonprofit, we were able to get that building at below cost. And then we went in and rehabbed it, fixed the environmental issues, and now we have a building that's worth $750,000. And that stuff wouldn't have happened. You know, we have local businesses that do all the wiring for us at no charge. Our plumbing is at no charge. Basically, the cost of our project is our concrete. So everything else is donated. So I think it's truly about, you know, everybody is like, right, they're all nonprofits, but these businesses want to give back, and not all of them are willing to write a check. So I think it's getting creative with how you can take their gift, right? I mean, we take some pretty crazy stuff that we can't even use sometimes, but we've also been able to build some great partnerships. Pella is a nationwide partnership, Mitsubishi, Atlas Roofing, so all these places that Hardy Board, right? We build our homes to code. So IKEA, we no longer pay for furniture inside the home. So it's just a really kind of a cool thing to do if you can get creative with how they should give back, right?
Wonderful, thank you so much. I do want to know, Darla, from your perspective, what housing initiative in the last year, either locally or nationally, do you believe has made the biggest difference or impact?
I think one of the biggest initiatives has been the opportunity for us to, with changes in our assisted living regulations, to do more services in assisted living. There is a growing demand for nursing home beds. It has been for a long time. Sioux Falls has had a challenge with having enough availability in nursing homes in Sioux Falls, and so being able to do more services in assisted living certainly was an opportunity for us to be able to meet the needs of people at a very basic level, nursing home care in assisted living, giving up those nursing home beds to people who needed them for rehab, but also allowing us to meet the needs of those residents in a more cost-affordable way, being able to stretch their resources farther. I think also the growing, on another side, is just the growing housing needs with senior living here in Sioux Falls. It's great to see the fact that there's now cooperative style housing coming to Sioux Falls along with the condo. It's great to see Sioux Falls being a resident of downtown Sioux Falls. It's great to see the growing housing in downtown Sioux Falls. And so I'm always asking myself, a number of those are people 55 plus, and how do we bring services to the downtown Sioux Falls to meet those people's needs? And so new initiatives with bringing services outside of the walls is an important part of Sioux Falls housing as well.
Thanks. Rich, I'd like to ask you this question too. What housing initiative in the last year, locally or nationally, has made the biggest difference or impact that you think?
I'm going to break the rules again and change the question just a little bit.
Go ahead.
I'm going to change it to what housing initiative do I think is going to make the biggest difference?
I like that
to start
too.
it. Grab your pen, and you're going to write this down in 2 different places. Write down One Roof. One Roof is a game changer for the city of Sioux Falls. Program through the community outreach partnership with Thrive and others. One Roof is an opportunity for our community to say, you know what, we're going to use existing units. Look, think of it this way. It's Uber or Lyft. You got all these housing units over here. You have these people in need over here. Let's not maybe build more units. Let's use existing units to meet an existing need. So here's what I want you to do with your pen. Write down One Roof in your notebook for you as a developer or business to connect with that program and become a participant. Now, get out your checkbook. Is this legal to ask for money up front? Right, get out your checkbook and make a donation to the One Roof program. Here, the IRS isn't going to listen to this, but this is fabulous. Make a donation to the One Roof program, tax-deductible gift. Guess who's going to benefit in the long run? You are. It's amazing. I'm not going to get into the details of the One Roof program. You can talk to him afterwards. One Roof program has an opportunity to change the landscape of housing in our community, and I think it's the very thing that we should all rally around.
Thank you for changing the question. I appreciate that. I'm going to revert it back to my original question, Cindy, but if you feel like you want to change the question, you can. What housing initiative in the last year, locally or nationally, do you believe has made the biggest impact or difference?
Okay, about a year and a half ago, I think it was, Bright Futures had been in existence for 6 years, and funded through the city. And the staff at the city were thinking that maybe it's time to see, does this program really work? They were investing a significant amount of money into the Bright Futures program, and it was time, and I was very supportive of that, because we need to know if what we're doing really has an impact on families. So an agreement was entered into between Augustana Research Institute and the city to do an in-depth analysis of the Bright Futures program, looking at cost versus outcomes. It started, and it did both long-term and short-term, looking back from families that had graduated and left the program 6 years ago to ones that were currently in the program. They also set up a control group of people that would have, that were homeless, because we're talking about homeless families with children. So they did a control group of homeless families with children receiving only rental assistance and no case management, and made a comparison then between families in Bright Futures who have the intense case management in addition to the rental assistance. What the analysis came back with showed me more than I would have expected. It showed that people who stayed in the Bright Futures program throughout their entire program saw greater wages, saw more consistent housing, reduced reliance on cash benefits and SNAP. Things that I was glad to see and was really hopeful that that's how that would turn out. But in addition, it showed that no matter how long those folks had been in the program, they realized some benefit. Now that was a surprise to me. I thought that they would have to stay in a minimum amount of time before the work that we do with them would have some impact, but that wasn't the case. Yes, the impact was much greater the longer that they were working with their coach, but even a minimal amount of time, when they looked out over the 6-year period, there were benefits derived. So that was major for the Bright Futures program and the impact that it has on homeless families.
Nate, I think I might know your answer, but I'm going to ask you anyway.
Yeah, thanks for asking. And thanks again, Rich, for supporting the One Roof. And so, I'm definitely not aware of all of the different housing initiatives nationally, but definitely am biased towards One Roof and Hezekiah House. And, both of these are more long-term programs, specifically Hezekiah House. But just to share us a few stories, just with the Hezekiah House program, there was a family that's in the program now, and they had, made a mistake in the past, received a felony on their record, ended up losing their current apartment. They were therefore homeless, kind of just living with the parents for the time being. We got connected to them. He first reached out through the Genesis program. He got plugged into our Genesis program. From there, we found out he was looking for a place, so we talked about the Hezekiah House program, the home ownership piece, and it was a good transition, a good fit, so we were able to have him placed in our Hezekiah House program. And so the reality is, in about a 4-year span, this individual, this family who was homeless, is hopefully going to be able to become a homeowner in that 4-year time period. So that's, I believe, is just an amazing transformation of a family in a approximately 4-year time frame, which, you know, they're still in their first year, and we're going to be working with them, and they've been doing great. But it's going to be an exciting day when, you know, hopefully they're able to get approved for a mortgage loan and move into their new home. For One Roof, also just some of the stories that, you know, some of the families we've been working with, they've made some mistakes in the past. They have a few felonies, both parents on their record. They recently just, they were living with friends for a while. They recently just had a newborn child. And, you know, no one would rent to them because they both spent some significant time in the criminal justice system. So they had no renting history, and they had felonies, and no one was renting to them. And they just had a newborn child, and they were living with friends in a bedroom, and their welcome was running short. And so we were able to work with a property manager who was on board with the One Roof program, and, you know, was able to be there when they signed that lease and were handed the keys, and just the joy in that family's face and the gratitude and gratefulness that they have just for programs like these. So,
Thanks. Chris, you have been to 6 housing summits yet this year, and we're thankful that we're one of those, and you've traveled the nation. Can you tell us, from your perspective, what has made the biggest difference?
So I think that they're one of the most, I think, cool things out there that I think incentivize organizations and developers to kind of come in and build stuff. I know that Denver has it, Anchorage has it, Orlando has it. It's called the Pay for Success model, where the city partners up with the bank to front the money, and then the organization comes in and can use that cash the way they're not borrowing, and they have an expectation. So take Denver, for instance. They built almost 400 units in Denver, affordable housing, but what they also did is provided the on-site services to keep them housed, right? And I think part of this Pay for Success model is it's insanely data-driven, so that the organization that took the money doesn't have to pay it back, right? They need to show that they're solving the problem for the city, right? So in Denver, they assume that it's about $80,000 per homeless individual on the street. That's what it costs the city a year. So this organization comes in and they are showing, hey, we're housing people, their housing success rate, that they're not moving out, and it's through a term of 5 to 7 years. At the end of that, the city picks up the note, and then they make the decision whether they're going to keep paying this organization to keep doing it or not. Right? So it's just a really cool, and that's probably very oversimplified, but Pay for Success is just a really cool thing. It incentivizes people to come in. And then the Homeless Housing Trust Fund, right? So some cities will allocate a percentage of their sales tax into a bucket, and then they'll make it available to individuals. I think that also is one of the greatest programs out there as well, because not every city has it, but those that do, it's so underutilized that they have money building up year after year after year. By year 3 or 4, they're able to invest in something big to make some real changes to the community. One of the cool things in Florida, public-private partnership, they created this, it's called the Orange County Homeless Coalition, and they built about 250 units. They built a building. And in 4 years, they have a 96% success rate of everybody staying housed. Not always necessarily with them, but permanently housed. And I think the key to that program is the on-site services that they provide. And their services aren't all that depth, but they provide case management, 15-to-1 ratio. I think that lower case management ratio is the key to those programs.
Great, thank you. I'm going to ask one more question before I get to the questions that all of you are interested in having answered. And so, Cindy, I'm going to start with you. There are dozens of housing agencies in service in Sioux Falls. How can agencies effectively work together to reach the right audiences and refer residents as necessary?
There are a number of ways. In Sioux Falls, there are forums, and there's Thrive that has several action teams in addition to strategic and their board that constantly keep communications going. Besides, there are forums. Realistically, though, it's very difficult to keep up with each other of the 23 organizations, what everybody is doing, and when you have funds and when you don't have funds, and when they should refer and when they shouldn't refer. Technology is a good thing when it comes to this. Kind of the issue with that is depending on funding, and we do take federal funding, we do take HUD funding, and because of that, we are required to enter into a coordinated entry system. Not everyone is required to enter into that system, so you can kind of look at that as a standalone system. That's just an example of, depending on where funding is coming from, and I think many of you will have an understanding of this, there are requirements in terms of technology and databases. If you're going to take our money, you need to enter into our database. If you're going to take our money. So right now, our coaches are entering into, I believe, 3 different databases because we get 3 different funding sources. Now, I am definitely not a technology guru. I mean, anybody who knows me would tell you that. However, it seems that people that are and have knowledge of this say that there are methods to have those different databases talk to each other. So if you enter into one, it can be shared between the other databases. My understanding also is that can be costly to do something like that. But at the end of the day, that cost is over many years once something like that would be established. So that's one avenue perhaps that could create a way for us all to communicate better with each other.
And I'm going to go right down the line and Rich ask you that same question. Knowing that there are a dozen of housing agencies and services in Sioux Falls, how can agencies effectively work together to reach the right audiences and refer residents as necessary?
I'm going to focus on the part, how can we effectively work together, and then like a presidential debate, I'm going to use the question just to get to what I want to say. And I think there's a way in which we can all work together better, and that's in the area of how we're approaching the government agencies around us. So for example, we obviously have a challenge in the lower income, 30-40% AMI, but we also have a challenge in the middle income area. So for example, if you're a home buyer looking for something, $180,000 to $250,000, that's a serious problem in our community. And I firmly believe if we don't solve that problem, without a strong middle class, everything else begins to struggle big time. So where I believe we can start to effectively work together is we can't all go, Erica, close your ears here for a second because I'm going to give away our strategy. We can't all go to Mayor Paul and Erica at the same time and ask for different tax breaks and tax incentives for all of our different things. I think what we have to do as a community, developers, businesses, and agencies is agree that, hey, for this next season, we've got to really focus in and go to the county commission, go to the city council, go to the state, and we've got to say, you know what? We need some tax incentives for this $180,000 to $250,000 home. That might mean we're not going to get some tax incentives for other areas that we're working in. But for a window of time, we've got to work together, combine our forces, and a louder voice is going to get a greater tax incentive in one of those areas that's going to benefit everyone. So I think what I'm trying to say here is how we work effectively is we go together to the government and say, this is where we believe we should be putting our community resources at this time.
Thank you. Nate, there are dozens of housing agencies and services in Sioux Falls, your organization and community outreach being one of those. How can agencies effectively work together to reach the right audiences and refer residents as necessary?
Essentially, it's communicating with the other agencies. There's a really good example of this. It's called the CARE team. And so what the CARE team is, we meet on a weekly basis, and multiple different agencies and organizations, we meet together in a room, and we kind of look over a list of families who have made some touch point at any one of those agencies. Some of those include Minnehaha County Human Services, the Community Outreach, the Sioux Falls School District is part of that, the Bishop Dudley Hospitality House. There's others that are in that room as well, and we're at the table. We talk about the families. Has any agency had any experience with that family in the past? We find out what program they might be eligible for, what they are ineligible for. And then after that meeting, we have a solidified next step of who's going to be following up and what program we think would be the best fit for them. That way we have one person contacting that family or individual with some clear next steps, so that we're not having them go from agency to agency, finding out what they're not qualified for, telling them to call this number, them to call that agency, say, oh no, that's not right, that wasn't up to date, maybe try this agency. So we kind of have come together, communicated to kind of give those clear next steps for families or individuals who are looking for housing or in a housing crisis situation.
I'm going to step in and pose one question in addition to what you just said, Nate, because I'm aware of the CARE team, and it is a great resource. But I'm going to ask this to both you and Cindy, because I think you'll be able to add some input to that. Do you believe, going forward, as the city continues to grow and more agencies evolve, that that is a sustainable model for effective communication in referring amongst agencies?
I definitely believe that. I believe the more people we could have at the table, the better we could serve, the better we can even partner together and make referrals to help better serve those who are in need, whatever their situation might be. So I believe the more people we can, have be involved in that, the better we can communicate, and the more we'll just learn about the other agencies that are even out there and what they offer. I think a part of this is just kind of learning of what different programs are even out there and who offers what and what's the best niche that they serve. So adding more people, more collaboration would definitely be helpful.
Cindy, I'm going to pose that same question to you.
Well, Shelley, I'm not sure. I'm not sure of the answer to that. The CARE team is working now, but Tammy, many of you know Tammy Denning, that she attends CARE team meetings. I don't think all of the 23 agencies, though, attend, and it could be expanded to include more people around the table. But for future, I really don't know. I don't know. It's working now. I think it's a very good way for us to communicate with those others around the table. My opinion is there's nothing beats the face-to-face and being able to get support in the kind of work we do, to have support of other service providers and to get together. I think that's an added bonus of sitting around that table. But in terms of being able to provide a quick way to direct people from agency to agency, I'm just not sure in the future as the city grows if that may need to be tweaked somewhat.
Darla, I'm going to come back to you then with my original question. Knowing that there are a dozen agencies for housing and services in Sioux Falls, how can these agencies work together to reach the right audience and refer residents if necessary?
We're a member of the Coalition on Aging, which is a group of organizations who do a variety of aging services in Sioux Falls, and it's a small group growing that coalition or developing a coalition that allows people who get any questions from seniors about housing to come together and learn not only who does what and what is the difference between assisted living or independent living, home health, skilled nursing. The baby boomers are going to push the bar in senior living as over the next 20 years, and so things are going to change substantially in that time. And so keeping abreast of those changes, how is the industry changing, how are the services changing within the organizations, a type of coalition such as the Coalition on Aging or something similar would allow people to come together and learn that together.
Thank you. Chris, I'll ask you as well. Although you may not be familiar with the 23 housing agencies that exist here in Sioux Falls, how have you seen or would you recommend agencies effectively work together to get to the right audience and refer residents?
So one of the things that we did in Kansas City, because we had this discombobulated thing, right? Some people were entering into HMIS, some people weren't, some people were going through MARC, which is another local agency that they call themselves the coordinator of all that stuff. When when I was working at United Way, and I don't know how many of you guys have heard of 211, right? It should be a pretty big thing, right? 211 is like a 911 for community resources. They also hold the largest database of people that call, where they're calling from, all of the above. So whenever I was there, what we did is we started this thing called the Veterans Alliance. Now, obviously, it's because I serve veterans. That's why we started the Veterans Alliance. But it started with just the 11 agencies in town that provide homeless services. That's it. And it grew from, and we meet once a quarter, so we're not meeting people to death because we all know how stupid that is. But it grew from just the 11 people showing up to where we have about 60 people showing up, and they're there to address the most prominent things that are in the community, right, that are veteran-centric. And what we do is we bring employers, housing individuals, emergency supportive services, all of the above, and we bring them all into a room and we just kind of shake it out. Spend about an hour and a half and talk about things. And then subcommittees are created in part of that. But when we're talking about sharing the referral piece, I think it's using already existing services, right? And then breaking down the barriers, right? People are afraid that all these grant-centric organizations, the majority of them, have to show that they're serving so many people, right? I think if we can get beyond that and realize that, listen, we need to serve them the best way versus just sticking them in our program, then referrals are going to start to flow. And that's kind of what we did at Veterans Community Project. We hire case managers, but everybody else that provides services are all community partners. We figured it out. We're like, listen, people would rather live in a tiny house than a shelter. They'd rather be in a tiny house than, some of the other places out there, because we build market grade homes. So we recognized real quick we could get the population, but part of that was realizing that not everybody is appropriate for our program. And so the Salvation sets up shop 2 days a week in our building. Catholic Charities does, Restart does, the DAV, VFW. So all of these agencies that are serving people, our building would be completely empty. I mean, it would be me and the case managers, and they're out working, so it would just be me in the building if it wasn't for those partnerships. Recognizing that we have a value by bringing people in based off the services we provide, whether it's the bait and switch thing with the bus passes or the tiny houses, but we also know that, Salvation Army and Restart both have seen their largest increase year over year over people coming into their program because people are coming to us, and it's just that shared partnership, right? We tell them, listen, we're not going to steal your money. We want to help you out because we can't do it all. And I think if it's creating those partnerships and having those conversations, and it doesn't happen after a one-time meeting, because trust needs to be built with the entity, and then the people that you're serving. Trust has to be built that you're going to put them in the most appropriate spot.
Thank you. Now I'm going to get to all of the questions that you feel are important to ask this panel. I'm going to direct the question at one of the panel members, and then if one of you also want to respond after that one, you may. But instead of going down the line, we'll do more directed so we can answer as many questions as we can in the time that we have left. So, Rich, I'm going to direct this one to you. If private investors go out on a limb and provide housing for people with bad credit and criminal history, how do you think we can support them when there are problems?
Great question. I think this is the beauty of the One Roof program, and built into the One Roof program model, excuse me, is case management. And so you're getting in front of the issues sooner rather than later. And then you've got someone that deals with this on a regular basis to help you walk through the process. And so if an individual is being a bad tenant, you're not handling them on your own, but rather you're partnering with somebody in the handling of them, and you're getting in front of the issue faster. And it saves more money to get in front of it rather than be behind it. And so I think case management is the critical piece of that.
So I think, in my opinion, I think that there's two ways. I think that the people that are providing those services and going out on the limb, I think they changed their property management model a bit, right? I would call it property management on steroids. To his point, it's the case management piece, right? The idea is to keep people housed. So if you have somebody there that's at one-stop shop, right, knows all the resources, and whenever they know that 10 days from now they're not going to be able to pay their rent, they can reach out to that individual, and that individual can connect them to the appropriate resources in the community, I think it's a win-win for everybody. I think we have to, the people providing these services have to get out of the mindset that it's just, I built a house, it's safe for people to live in and move on. The reality is the people that we're serving got in that position because they needed it in the first place, right? Majority of it. So I think if we continue to provide those supportive services, property management on steroids, then that's a great thing. The other thing is making it easier for these agencies to accept vouchers, HUD vouchers, and then the city coming in and supplementing that with additional vouchers, right? Because we recognize that HUD has their own number of getting to how they're going to provide how many vouchers, and it takes a good minute to get there. Then we also have HUD VASH, right? You have to meet these qualifications, but that only serves about this many people. I've seen some cities that'll go in and create their own personal voucher program. And it's ran through out of their homeless housing trust fund. And that's what kind of gets them in. And sometimes the voucher program only lasts for 9 to 12 months, but beyond that, they're connected with people that can help them get out of that position. So I think that there's the voucher program and just that assistive services.
Yeah. Oh, no, please.
In terms of damage and the credit situation, with the families that are in Bright Futures and Heartland House, and as a side note, Nate has mentioned this a couple times, we provide the landlord, if they're willing to take our clients, with a 2-month rent guarantee and up to $5,000 damage guarantee. These are funds that were raised many years ago. There was a group effort among some private banks to put together a fund that we have, and we have an advisory committee that oversees those funds that will provide that guarantee. Because even with case management, and that's what we do, is case management, the landlords are still hesitant about if they take our families, what's going to happen if they wreck my place? What's going to happen if they skip out? We used to do a 1 month rent guarantee, but we've extended that to 2, because if someone does damage, and then they're evicted, it takes more than 1 month for that landlord to become whole again, for them to get someone else in that place. So we do have that. It's tied to case management. We're doing a pilot with Nate right now with community outreach, because at their shop, they do case management also. We think it's the case management piece, though, that has to be there before that guarantee kicks in. Otherwise, we wouldn't have money very long, in our opinion. So we're trying that. We'll extend it further and keep exploring ways to secure landlords, because without those landlords' support, our families aren't going to find a place to live.
Great. The next question I have, and I will ask that whoever submitted this question, there's another panel coming up right before lunch where we're going to focus on the rental side of housing. So I'm going to ask that you repose this question to that group as well. But I do think this is a very prominent question for this group too. So where does tenant landlord education fit into helping with the current housing challenges? Nate, you could start.
So tenant education is very important. I know that we are working with, as part of the One Roof program, on establishing a tenant education class with LSS, and those have been conversations we had. We're still kind of finalizing some of those details, and a lot of times some families might not know how to be a good renter, whether they were never educated in that, maybe they never taught those things. So some things they aren't aware of, such as keeping their unit clean, not having people live in their unit for long periods of time. And we might say, well, it's in the lease, but most of the time they either don't read the lease or just sign the lease because they just want to move in. And so it's helping reinforce educating them that the lease is a legal binding document. If you're not abided by the lease, it could be cause for eviction. And so it's just educating them that this is what you signed, and even if you knew it or not, they should have had the opportunity to let you read through that. And so if they are in a lease, kind of walking them through that, making them understand what's allowed, what's not allowed, but also educating them on their rights as a tenant, in case there's any scenarios where, sometimes there are property owners and landlords who do things that aren't in the lease as well. And, we have fair housing that helps address some of those issues as well, but just kind of helping them understand what's in the lease, what are they required to do, also what are some things that, how can you be a good tenant so that this property owner would want to continue to rent to you, and also if you do leave, provide a good reference for you if you're trying to find housing elsewhere.
One of the things that we do in Kansas City is we have, there's two facets to it, right? The people that we serve in our tiny homes, yeah, they're houses and they're there for a reason, but truly it's an educational tool. We teach them how to maintain, it's part of the case management, how to clean up. If they put a hole in the wall, they're fixing the hole in the wall. So that way, whenever we do transition them, they're prepared to be good neighbors. There's a number of reasons that veterans become homeless, and sometimes there's this mental health aspect, right? Post-traumatic stress, and let's just put it out there. They're jerks to everybody they live next to, right? And sometimes, I will tell you that's one of the biggest reasons that we struggle to get people in. They've been disruptive, they've yelled at kids down the hall, whatever it looks like. So for us, it's educating our people that we're serving. Listen, there's appropriate channels to address your concerns, and sometimes being that buffer ourselves. I think the other thing is we bring all the landlords, everybody that gets federal tax dollars to build affordable housing, we send out an invite to them. Everybody that accepts vouchers in town, we send an invite. Anybody that's applied to accept vouchers, we send an invite because we also know that their homes are going to fall within that range. And we bring them on site and we show them, this is what we're doing, this is how intensive we are, and oh, by the way, we're there for you afterwards. But again, it's about bringing people together and then knowing who is serving your people. Listen, I say this all the time, I can house anybody. That's the easy part. It's keeping them housed, it's the most difficult part. But when it comes to veterans, I think everybody assumes that it's a federal issue, and but let's face it, they're coming back to our communities. And so our community needs to be there to step up for them. And the other thing I think we have going for us is they're veterans, right? Not many people want to be the people that say, I hate veterans, and not house them. So I think it's just finding those creative solutions and bringing people together to serve them appropriately, educating everybody.
Great. Next question. Where are each of your organizations seeing the greatest demand for housing needs? Cindy, I'll start with you.
Right now, for us, it's larger units. There seem to be, for our smaller families, the advent of additional tax credit properties has been wonderful for our families. But many times the number of units that are larger aren't there. So what we're struggling with is those larger units for our larger families.
Yeah, 3 to 4 bedroom units for families, and then opportunities for those with a criminal background. Those are the two needs we see the greatest of.
Part of the needs that we have seen is the housing programs that we have are, a portion of kind of what the community outreach does. Another portion that we have is our crisis care department, and what we do assist a lot with keeping people housed or getting them off the streets as well by offering assistance with either a deposit to get into that unit. Maybe it's first month's rent. Maybe they had a crisis where they were unable to work for a week, and unless they pay rent, they'll be evicted. So we might be able to assist financially in that area. Through those different housing programs, there is also that financial assistance as well. So we are there. We know that if your car breaks down and you can't get to work, we might be able to assist in paying your rent so that you can go get your car fixed, so you can not lose your housing because of a crisis that was unforeseen, unplanned for, and everyone's financial situation is different, unique, and a lot of times when they're reaching out to us, they're in some level of crisis. So we try to help our best financially for those in our programs as well.
I think in senior living, memory care is one of those areas that continues to grow, and we see a demand for, unfortunately. Alzheimer's and dementia is a growing disease. And it's a challenge meeting the needs of those residents. There are younger people with dementia and Alzheimer's, and so it takes a different environment, a different socially set up area for someone in their 50s and 60s with dementia and Alzheimer's versus someone 75 plus. So being able to have different memory care centers that meet the different needs of the residents and the numbers will continue to grow.
For us, I think it's a combination of everything that's already been spoken about today, right? The criminal, and then those dealing with the mental health and substance abuse issues, right? For us, that's our biggest challenge in getting people housed. We'll get them there, and then they're thriving for a while, and then they hit that peak or that plateau, and then things start to fall off the map. So for us, it's truly being, that follow-on care whenever we're moving people on to kind of help address it. I mean, I think we've figured out how to navigate the credit issues, the eviction stuff, all that stuff, right? Because we do provide the free legal services that are there to kind of get people, shake all that stuff out. But for us, it's the whole mental health piece, and then, kind of being able to work with them through that, and the agencies that are housing them.
The next question is, the city has raised costs for private apartment owners through policies and systems that encourage disgruntled people from filling anonymous complaints. How can this change from your perspective? Anybody wish to tackle that question?
Say it again.
Yeah.
The city raises cost for private apartment owners through policies and systems that encourage disgruntled people from filling anonymous complaints. How can this change? And maybe this would be a good one, again, for our rental panel that we have coming up. So maybe we will ask whoever asked that question to, again, pose that at our later session, and we'll move on to the next one. Chris, this one's directly at you. Are you interested in coming to Sioux Falls, and do you have any info on our demand for vet housing in Sioux Falls?
In short, yes, we're interested in going anywhere where the support is, right? So we fall into that market, or that realm where we don't take the federal money, so we need the communal support. And whether that's property from the land is usually the tipping point for us. If somebody says, hey, I've got 5 acres, and we do have some prerequisites on the property that before we take it, because I've learned some lessons in this property acquisition. Usually people want to give it away because it's horrible, right? They talk it up. I mean, they try to sell it. I mean, they're great real estate guys. But then you get into it, and then you find there's no infrastructure. That's something that we've learned how to handle as well. But for us, the property should be on a bus line, because we can't go out buying people cars all the time. And we do have great partnerships where we get probably 65 cars gifted a year, to our people. But for us, it's to not remove people from the resources, to keep them entrenched in their community. So we need to teach them how to use public transportation appropriately. So yes, we'd love to come to Sioux Falls. And then for the veteran population, so without a military post here, you can assume, identified or unidentified, that 25% of your population is going to be vets, right? And so I think everybody in here knows about the point in time count, and most people do it once a year. We traditionally serve 4 to 5 times more than that, because our definition of veteran is much larger, right? Anybody that's ever taken the oath is a vet to us. You can serve 1 day, you can serve 25 years. We're still going to serve you. It's irrelevant, right? We don't base our services off of income or off how long you served or what area you served. So we're kind of the catch-all for people. So, last year in Kansas City, off of 26 houses, we provided over 4,000 bed nights of people in a house. I think that's quite a bit. And, we were able to successfully transition our people at a rate of 83%, within the first 6 to 8 months, transition them into permanent supportive housing. So yes, to answer your question, we'd love to explore that opportunity. But again, cities have rules, right? They have, a lot of them don't like tiny houses, let's just be honest, right? We don't ever worry about that not in my backyard thing, because we kind of fix that. We have little models that we take to every fair, festival, school thing, and so per city, we do about 500 events a year. Just getting that education out, showing them that we're putting people in quality homes and things like that. So, yes, and support from the city would be great. You know, and then we look at other things, you know, because we are privately funded. Can the city support our operating expense once we get up and going, right? Because there's a lot that goes on. So, just all that stuff.
Great, thank you. Panel, what parameters are being used to define affordable housing, purchase price, fair market value, rental price? I'm looking at you, Rich.
Well, I think there's two different, one is the average median income, obviously in the tax credit world, is used the most of determining what rent will be and so forth. And I think that the challenge on that is on paper, that's what you use, but that not necessarily mean affordable for the person that falls into that income bracket. And so I think we've got to be really sensitive to the other challenges that exist in our community economically, especially around the healthcare realm for individuals that, like, yeah, they should be able to afford this rent. But when you start actually taking into consideration the other things that are rising in cost, like healthcare, it impacts what a true affordability is for a family that's looking for a place to live. And so I think we got to have a broader perspective than just the number on the paper, but I realize the number on the paper does make it easier to manage.
I feel like the number on paper is a starting point for a lot of people, but it's getting creative with how you manage that for the people, to your point. I think that there's agencies that, you know, hit what that 60% is that number that to qualify for credits and things of that nature, but I think if you incentivize them with, you know, through the city and things like that, they're going to serve people that are much lower. And it's just getting creative with that, right? The reality is, in my opinion, the federal government and even at state level, they can't provide all the solutions for the people that we're trying to house. I mean, it's truly got to be unique to the community and how you guys are addressing it. And there's hundreds of different ways. It's just, you know, how are we going to skin the cat today, right? And so, you know, there's the vouchers programs that supplement that to make it incentivized for these people that obviously can't hit that. There's that gap. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity there.
Great. So the next question, and we've talked a lot about not in my backyard. So knowing that that's a big barrier in neighborhood involvement, how can we resolve those fears without giving into all of their demands?
I can take that one. So two of our communities that we're moving on right now, the one in Kansas City, we built it. We're nestled between an apartment complex that serves 72 people, 66 of them are single moms. Across the street, it's 104 units. It's another apartment complex. And even further, if you head down east to the road that we built on, there's a senior housing facility. It's been there for 20 years. And then we're surrounded by homes that people have lived in for 40 plus. They've been in their family for a long time. The minute they heard that we acquired this property, and they're like, oh, I mean, people started knocking on our door. They're like, what the heck? And asking these questions. We educated them on the services that we provide. You know, and the cool piece is that since we've been in there, the crime rate's gone down. The local police officers in Kansas City refer to us as the mafia in that area because people just don't mess with us. Our houses aren't getting broken into, things like that. So I think it's just providing quality housing and then educating. We listen to their needs, right? They were like, please don't put another chain link fence up. We're like, done, not a problem. We can solve that. Like, what about security for for the people in the community? You know, we have case managers that rotate, and somebody's there 24 hours a day. You know, we have an in and out policy. So I think that there's that. And then we also fight the whole tiny house thing, right? Nobody wants tiny houses. Some people refer to them as, you know, especially because everybody watches those shows, right? The Tiny House Nation and all that stuff. And so they think all of our houses are on wheels. So they think we're just moving in another trailer park. I think there's a way to kind of get there to make everybody happy. You know, we truly worked with the city on this, on both of our projects. You know, our houses, it's a subdivision, if you will. You know, we have 5 different color schemes, 3 different roof lines, 2 different versions, and we meet all code, right? Fire truck turnaround, all that stuff. that we have to. The city extorted some property out for a park easement, all that kind of stuff, but I think it's just working together. In Colorado, we're going into this very high-end community, and so for the last year, we've had to do these public hearings, because we're surrounded by nearly $1 million homes. I will tell you, people respond if you answer their questions. They just want to be heard, and I think that you'll get some of that not in my backyard thing, but not often, as long as you're educating them. Again, we do a ton of, for us as a nonprofit, for us to invest time into school districts and things like that, I mean, there's no monetary return, right? And usually, to keep a nonprofit going, you have to have a return on your investment. We do that stuff because when the kids are excited about it, then their parents are excited about it, and then the parents are less likely to, so we have a very specific system as to how we address it. And it usually starts with the youth, because the parents follow what their kids are going to do. And so it's just kind of a thing that we do.
Any other panelists wish to address that?
Well, I will jump on that one. I think we do need to consider, because I love everything you said there about those things. In Sioux Falls specifically, we got the not in my backyard specifically around apartments and multifamily dwelling situations. And the issue's growing, I think. To me, there's two things, and these are both kind of political things. One is I think we got to take some consideration of how we do this from the Planning Commission to the City Council. We seem to move from kind of nothing to bleep hits the fan, right? I mean, it's just like you go from 0 to 90 just like that. And those that are involved with it are saying, look, we're not going 0 to 90. We've been involved in this for a year and a half. We do got to find a way to help bring the public along sooner in that process. And I know you're just like me, you're like, oh my goodness, more neighborhood meetings, right? It's like, for me, it's like more church meetings. Oh, please. But it is true. The perception of being heard is a big deal. So I think we got to talk about the system of getting in front of the fireworks before the fireworks show up at City Council and provide an avenue for that to happen in the neighborhoods itself. And so I'd encourage our city government to consider a bridge between the Planning Commission and the City Council of how we start those conversations better.
Thank you.
And I'll tell you, I agree with you. I do think that there has to be this kind of ownership with the people that are going into the communities. I mean, we did stupid things like bounce houses and hot dogs for everybody and just gave away stuff, right? Gave them an opportunity to kind of shake that stuff out. That stuff that the people that really have an issue, they're not, I mean, the people that live there, and aside from a few vocal people that show up for a city council meeting, you're not going to get to hear what needs to be done. So I think it's community engagement on behalf of who's going in. And I get it. It's retarded to drag a bounce house out there 3 or 4 times, a month trying to engage these people. And I tell you, when we first did it, they were only sending their kids out, and their kids were getting the burgers and the hot dogs. But after the 3rd time, the parents are coming. And then that's whenever we were able to address the specific concerns. And I will tell you, it has never gotten to the city council level. It's never gotten to where, when we're having our public hearing, there's no opposition. We traditionally have everybody showing up to champion what we're doing, but I think it's because of the engagement. It has to be, it can't be forced upon by the city. I think the developer, the people going in, has to kind of own it a little bit.
Anybody else? Great. Well, we have about 15 minutes left in this session, and so I have Seth and Matt in the back of the room with roaming mics. So this is going to be now an opportunity where you have submitted your questions to the panel, and we've been addressing them. There are so many wonderful questions that are coming through, of which I'm thankful we're able to catalog them, so that way, going forward in continuing meetings, we can pose these questions. But I would like to hear from all of you, but I will preface that by saying, when you get up to speak, please limit your time so that way others that want to speak also have time in the last 15 minutes. But I would also like to keep this conversation engaging. So I would like your question, or I would like it to either be a question for the panel or a solution to some of the problems that we have lifted up today. We've lifted up a lot of challenges, and I think we're all aware of what those are. So now I'd like to engage in an active conversation about what are the solutions to some of the problems. Our panel has been fortunate to offer up some of those solutions, but I know that all of you have great ideas because you're experts in your field. So if you have a question or if you have a solution, please raise your hand. Keep it to about 2 minutes if you can so that we can get to as many people as we can. Raise your hand. Oh, we got right there.
My question is...
Please introduce yourself
okay,
too.
Sure.
Thanks.
I'm Chris Dugard. I work for Ernst Capital Group here. We're a real estate investor. And my question was if the panelists could describe a little bit about a bit of maybe a profile or a little bit of the context regarding the citizens that they're serving. Because I think oftentimes you'll hear general statements around low income or AMI or cost or rent or some of the things that they're incurring or the citizens that you're serving. I think it's helpful for people to hear some of the specifics about maybe the citizens that are living at Dalrymple. What are their impacts from their Medicaid reimbursement rates and how Dalrymple reacts to that? Or what are some of the actual incomes, cash incomes, of some of the people that are served by ICAP or other places, so that people can give a context of, okay, how is that pie starting, and then how does that start to get split down when the rubber meets the road? Because that's really difficult, and those are the realities that those citizens are facing when they're trying to enter the different housing options that we're trying to help with.
Panel, if you could keep your response brief so we can get to more.
I'll start that since you referred to Dalrymple. The profile of the people that we serve at Dalrymple are 75 plus. Their income levels are all different income levels. We have residents who come in with financial needs from the very beginning, and so our nursing home, we provide Medicaid support in our nursing home for those residents who do not have enough assets or income to cover their costs. We do not currently do Medicaid in assisted living and memory care, primarily because of the really low reimbursement rate. When you're losing $20 a day per bed in assisted living and up to $35 per day per bed in the skilled nursing, you have to have some boundaries there. But we do have an endowment fund at Dalrymple that we use for residents in assisted living and Medicare who need that additional financial support. So rather than using state funds, we're using our own endowment to do that and find ways to keep growing our endowment. But the profile that we serve is residents across the board when it comes to income levels.
I think one of our common residents is a single parent that's working 25 to 30 hours a week, usually around the income of $11 an hour after it's all figured out. So a lot of time it's wait staff, so that income is changing quite a bit depending upon the month. Some months can be $1,200, some months can be $2,000, and so it can be really a challenge for them of trying to build that budget each month when it's changing like that and their hours are shifting around, and usually anywhere from 2 to 3 children. So 2 to 3 kids living on an income of $1,200 a month. If $600 is going towards rent, you can see how, I don't know how much lemonade you can get out of that lemon.
And just to piggyback off that, Rich, we have a similar clientele. Just most of our one-roof families are single parents. They all have children, and 3 of the 4 families have felonies. So it's been a way we can provide them with that housing. And as Rich mentioned, it's more of that lower income with a felony. Obviously, not only limits your housing options, but your job opportunity options as well. And so just kind of finding ways with that inconsistent income, whether as a wait staff, whatever that might be, but we have very similar clientele.
So we're serving veterans, and like I said, nearly 90% of them have a fixed income. And whether that's traditionally the minimum is, if they're VA eligible, it's their pension, just $1,300 a month. But most of them have a combination of that and Social Security. And so for us, it's people we're serving aren't without income. It's just how do you live within it. And we've served people that get $200-300 a month and that's it. And then we've also served people that are the combination between 100% service connected and their Social Security. They're making well over $500-600 a month. They've just run into some sort of trauma that caused it, and it's kind of resetting them. We serve primarily 60% of the demographic we serve are Vietnam-era veterans. And the reason I think is because their bodies are starting to fail. They're ready to start coming in. They can't handle the cold like they used to. They've burned every bridge out there. They're done couch surfing. Then the rest are Iraq, Afghanistan, Gulf War vets, which I think is a unique thing to our organization, because those younger guys usually have a few years left of hanging out in mom's basement or on grandpa's couch, whatever that looks like. But I think they're coming to us because the homes that we provide, the tiny homes, are truly, they're safe, they're secure. You know, we build them very specifically to address post-traumatic stress, things of that nature. And so I think that they're coming to us is because it's an opportunity for them to handle their stuff appropriately without the pressures, and, you know, they don't have to worry about, you know, where they're going to sleep the next night. And so most agencies across the board are only serving 8 to 9% Iraq, Afghanistan vets. And so we serve a higher number, a significantly higher number.
Cindy, you want to share?
The families that we serve are similar to these guys. Single moms with kids, they're homeless. So many times they don't have any income. Many times they're fleeing domestic violence. So we work closely with Children's Inn, is where some of our referrals come from. You know, they many times are even working under 30 hours. That they have a very part-time job. And in those cases, you know, they have some choices. They can get a second job, or they need to find something working more than 30 hours a week, because they cannot subside on less than that. And they make probably $10 an hour.
Great. Hands raised. Erica?
So Rich, the question is, so you didn't talk a lot about the program that you are currently pursuing in Pettigrew Heights, where you're going in and remodeling homes. Can you talk a little bit about that specifically, and then talk about what kinds of challenges that you're experiencing in remodeling those homes, and what's the cost of that look like to you when you're going in, and what are you experiencing in that process?
Thanks. I had so many other things I wanted to get across. I didn't have time to talk about the program that I'm actually involved in. We're involved in a program in Pettigrew Heights called Pettigrew Renewal. Sioux Falls Ministry Center is trying to lead an effort of bringing renewal specifically to that neighborhood, of taking lower-end housing, whether it be single-family, duplex, or triplex, and bringing it up and keeping it affordable and safe at the exact same time. So at this point, we've bought 5 properties. Basically, the way the numbers are working right now, it's about $40,000 per unit capital that we've got to come up with. We've got a great relationship with a local lender that's being extremely generous in the financing. We're targeting 2 to 4% return on each property. And one thing we're looking into that we're really excited about, we don't know a lot about right now, but Pettigrew Heights is in the opportunity zone. And so we're looking at an opportunity of using opportunity funds for this project. And so a 2 to 4% return isn't exactly sexy for a lot of investors. But those who have a heart for the city of Sioux Falls, if you take a 2 to 4% return, plus take in, excuse me, the opportunity zone opportunity, it becomes more of a thing that somebody might say, you know what, this is a good thing for our community, plus this isn't a horrible return, it's safe. So that's a really high-level, quick overview. Challenge that we're facing is very simply access to the homes that we believe we should be working on. So we want to get the lower tier single-family duplex, triplex homes, and a lot of those individuals aren't interested in selling, to be frank. It's an individual that has received the home from their aunt, and they're getting $500 a month in cash, so it's like, woohoo, free $500 a month. But that house is just horrible conditions. And so I'll finish my thoughts with something extremely controversial, the way I started. The biggest challenge we're facing, we don't have enough levers to pull to force the issue with some of these landlords. To be really frank, and I'm not, again, promoting regulation, I've been in multiple homes in the city of Sioux Falls where every citizen in this community should be embarrassed that we'd allow a 4-year-old to live in those conditions. Whether you're pro-regulation or anti-regulation, it's unacceptable that we would have a community that would allow that. And it's happening, specifically in Pettigrew Heights, but it's also happening in other areas of our community. We've got to have a conversation as a community, come together and say, what levers can we put in place? So 2 quick examples. Number 1, the police department, I believe, is having good conversation around the drug issue. So previously, they were kind of saying, hey, let's let the lower level stuff go and let's go after the higher end dealers. Partially makes sense. Where you run into serious problems on that is those lower end people are some of these that are living in these homes. It's a policy that has impact on housing. We've got to talk about the best policing strategy. The other conversation we need to have is around rental regulation and ways in which we can, again, have access to the home to pull some levers to say to these landlords, that's unacceptable in our communities. Biggest challenge we're facing is access to those homes that we all know need to have a freshening up.
Thank you. We have about 2 minutes left in our discussion. So can we have, if somebody has a solution that they want to offer? We got one in the back?
Hello. Hi. Joe Batchelor with downtown Sioux Falls. We heard about NIMBYs, and a lot of times it's a reaction to higher density multifamily housing in a neighborhood abutting single family housing. A lot of times the zoning tries to address that. And there's this term called missing middle, and there's a spectrum of intensity with housing, and missing middle refers to housing forms that used to be built that no longer are being built for whatever reason, like courtyard apartments, bungalow courtyards, multiplexes, boarding houses, things like that. And they offer that kind of scale of housing that maybe tiny homes do. That's an exciting new building form. But I'd just like to know with the panel, what does the organizations that you represent, are you familiar with the missing middle concept, and do you have a stand on it as far as how we can advance that and start building some of these housing forms that we used to build 50, 60 years ago that served a lot of the population that we're talking about?
And panel, we have 1 minute.
So we get faced with that often, right? They're like, well, who's going to maintain it, right? Because I think those homes and the things that were provided 50, 60 years ago, people are afraid of that stuff kind of coming back in and becoming a blight, because let's recognize it serves a specific demographic of people. But I think the way we address it specifically is we provide all the property maintenance. We almost like a HOA, if you will, for our community. And I know that a lot of people don't like HOAs and things of that nature, but I mean, that was part of the agreement that we made with the city when we came in, is that the individuals aren't responsible for the maintenance and care of the homes that we were. And I think that's how we got around it.
I don't know if this exactly gets what you're getting at, if I'm understanding correctly. I've had a lot of conversation with developers, construction, and business individuals around what we consider the single-family story-and-a-half home that's missing in a lot of situations across our community. Challenge in Sioux Falls right now, we'll probably hear more about this later, is the construction of those units are extremely hard because of the workforce market, the market as a whole. So what I was kind of saying earlier, we need to find some incentives that can incentivize that construction in that middle area, whether it's a story-and-a-half single-family home, duplex, triplex thing. So it's not just either the extreme $450,000 home or the apartment building where the profit's really at in those different areas.
Great, thank you. Can we all get a round of applause for our panel? Again, as this discussion is going along, please start submitting your questions through our Slido app. We will reserve time to be able to pose your questions to the panel. We will also, again, reserve time so that if you do have a solution to a problem that is addressed through this panel, that you have an opportunity to share a little bit about that. So join me in welcoming our next panel. With us, we have Lynn Keller-Forbes, Executive Director of CCOG. Lynn serves as the Executive Director of Dakota Business Finance, the Southeastern Development Foundation, and the Southeastern Council of Governments. Lynn has served as Director of CCOG since 2001 and led the organization's efforts to create the Southeastern Development Foundation and Dakota Business Finance. Lynn is a certified economic and housing development professional through National Development Council. She has a bachelor's degree in business administration from St. Leo College in St. Leo, Florida, and a Juris Doctorate law degree from the University of South Dakota. Also join me in welcoming Jeff Nelson. Jeff has been selling, he is the owner and real estate agent with 605 Real Estate. Jeff has been selling and teaching real estate for the last 42 years. He also serves on the Sioux Empire Housing Partnership Board and the Homeless Advisory Board. Kelly Nielsen, owner of Nielsen Construction. Kelly offers over 18 years of experience in construction, planning, and building. Kelly has places and several emphasis on throughout thoughtful and careful planning of each construction phase. This focus ensures achieving the goal of building the best value in every project. And last but not least, Carl Fulmer with Sioux Falls Housing Redevelopment Commission. Carl came to Sioux Falls in 2017 as the new director of the Sioux Falls Housing and Redevelopment Commission and Affordable Housing Solutions. He brings more than 23 years of single-family, multifamily, restaurant, commercial, and development experience to Sioux Falls region. He's developed properties that rely on public-private partnerships while also leading teams in private, for-profit development. And additionally, he has served as the head of the nonprofit housing agencies for more than 12 years. Please join me in welcoming our board, or our panel. As we did with the last panel, I would like to start this panel with a polling question. And the question is, what do you believe is the greatest barrier to home ownership in Sioux Falls? What's different about this poll is that we don't actually have an answer to this one. So the last poll we knew that was 23. This one we don't have an answer. We just want your opinion. One more second for everybody to vote. Has everybody voted? Looks like availability of housing wins in this poll. So to start with this panel discussion, I'm going to pose the question to Kelly Nielsen. Kelly, owner-occupied housing permits year-to-date for 2019 are down about 30% compared to 2018. Can you tell me your thoughts on that?
Yes. It's on. This is on. There you go. Yeah, I don't think that it's really much directed other than the weather, unfortunately, this season. Can I hear? I think it's mainly due to the weather, actually. It's not directed for any other reason than that. And then on top of that is a price point. There's not near the people able to move. Building costs have increased, so if you're living in a $250,000 house, to move to a larger home is going to cost you significantly more than you can afford to upgrade. And then price point, location are also factors in this as far as being able to find a home that's in that 180 to get out of a rental. It's just really hard to build that price point.
Great. Lynn, can you tell us, same question, knowing that they're down about 30% compared to 2018, do you have any thoughts on that stat?
I think a lot of it might be related, at least in Southeastern Development Foundation's case. We primarily develop governor's houses, and for the last several years we've been doing about 10 a year. We've actually cut that down to 8 this year. We've done that because we have a hard time finding contractors, because they in turn are having a hard time finding workers. So it's difficult when you have pretty much an April to October or November construction period for us to be able to get that many houses done at that time. I also think the cost of development has gone up significantly, so we do get some funding from South Dakota Housing and try to buy down those costs. And previously we had been doing and getting about $10,000 per house, and we have increased that due to the increased cost in building up to $14,000, but that also then means that you can afford to do less houses. I think there's also an availability of lots is a problem for a lot of contractors. And we, a couple of years ago, bought up quite a few lots in an area in the northwest part of town. And I get a lot of calls from realtors and smaller contractors that are wanting to buy those lots, which And we've kind of held on to them because if we sell them, we're in the same boat that they are at this time as well. And then I think finally the cost of infrastructure is expensive if you're putting in, if you're out of lots and you're trying to put in roads and infrastructure to go to a new area, that cost has also risen as well.
Thank you. Jeff, can you please give us your read on the pulse of the Sioux Falls owner-occupied housing market? What are the market pressure points, and what would be your forecast over the next 3 years?
It's hard to say what's going to happen. It's hard to say. It's hard to say what's going to happen over the next 3 years, but I think when you look at a lot of factors that are out there, wage growth versus home price growth, I think, is the biggest issue right now. I think that if we were to solve every problem that we talked about in the first session and in this session and probably in the next, if we had higher wages across the board, we wouldn't have the problem. But we know that's not going to be one of the factors that we deal with. School debt's going to be an issue. Right now they say that the median school debt for someone coming out of college is about $41,200 and the median income is $38,800. The lenders in the room could tell you about how student debt is impacting housing affordability, or not the housing affordability, the availability to get into a house with a mortgage. Down payments, certainly. A third of the people require down payment assistance from family or friends. We're just dealing with a lot of factors that over the next 3 years will become more complex. And that's not to sound dreary. Sioux Falls is a great community to live in, and Sioux Falls is always going to be a place where people will come to work because this is where the work is.
Carl?
I'd reiterate some of what Jeff has said. Affordable housing solutions. We work with the city oftentimes in their neighborhood revitalization program. We predominantly build ownership housing for people at 80% or less of median. And what we see is that the price points that we try to meet through that program were generally under $180,000 for a single-family detached unit. 2/3 of our buyers need down payment assistance. We partner with South Dakota Housing for a lot of our down payment assistance funds. And that can be anywhere from $10,000 up to $25,000. That certainly affects the population that we try to serve. Not having down payment assistance for many would exclude them from purchasing a home. Additionally, Jeff touched on this, but we do have, most of our buyers, because we're dealing with households under 80% of median, they bring debt into the equation. And with a lower income, even at $170,000 for a home, a lot of the lending ratios that we're seeing, they might be able to approach 31, 32% on the front end, but many of them are over 50% on the back end. We do have some lenders in our community we work with that will be more aggressive and use somewhat more aggressive ratios for their loans. The danger with that is, for at least our clientele, is we don't want to see people set up to fail. And when we're dealing with low-income households, that's always a risk. We've had a lot of units on the market and sold in the past 6 months. The vast majority of our buyers need down payment assistance. And then they also need a little bit of relief. I've had this discussion with South Dakota Housing. Some of the lending ratios, if we tighten them too much, then we'll cut out 90% of our potential buyers. So it's a struggle in the community to really accommodate the lower income levels. And when I say low income, I don't mean that these are income levels that are out of the ordinary for the Sioux Falls market. People making under 80% of median, I think the new single-person median household income is $48,000 a year. So they're not folks that are low income making $15,000 a year we're talking about. These are families that have service sector jobs, jobs that dominate a lot of our market in Sioux Falls. What we're seeing in new construction, we're not seeing homes built and brought on the market in new construction oftentimes under $230,000, $240,000. That will lock out the vast majority of the buyers that we try and service. So,
Thanks, Carl. So Jeff and Kelly, I'm going to pose this question to you. And I'll start with you, Kelly. What is the greatest barrier to home ownership in Sioux Falls, and how can the City of Sioux Falls, private business, and/or nonprofits work together to overcome these barriers?
I think greatest barrier is a lot of what we've talked about earlier in the earlier panel, and what he just mentioned is the down payment and just getting them started. A lot of them in homeownership they're just struggled with past decisions of whether it's felonies or bad debt, chasing them. They can't seem to get ahead of it, even though they've straightened up and cleaned up. They're unfortunate in trying to get past them next steps in the beginning, and they just need that assistance. And I think we spent a lot of time visiting about in the last panel, but just figuring out a way to use them programs that are out there to benefit to get to that next step is one of the big barriers. Obviously, the second is price point. Just trying to provide a product that is affordable for them and have that out there for them to even consider.
Jeff, do you want to add?
Well, I think there's a lot, excuse me. I think there's a lot of things that the city can do. And whether it's Sioux Falls or T or Harrisburg or Brandon or anything, we have to have a realization that there's a lot of different ideas across the country. We heard some of them earlier. Tiny houses, new building concepts, maybe ideas like Carl's got on Sycamore, just north of 18th Street, that maybe aren't, if we were to use the word normal for Sioux Falls, but they're good units. They're available for people that are in the right price point, and they have the availability of being great housing. But I think we, as traditionalists, and I look up here, I was selling real estate before all of you guys were born. I think we have to take away some of the traditionalist idea. Granny houses, nobody's talked about that. I'm trying to get one in the backyard, but my wife won't move into it. We don't say, those of you who know her, do not tell her that. I think we have to have new ideas, and I think that's going to help. Certainly granny houses. I think about my dad who's in a nursing home, and I don't know that he really likes it there so much, but if he could have his own place of about 150, 200 feet in the backyard, and we could watch him all the time and be there, we'd appreciate that more, and he would appreciate it more. But we have to have the city look at some of those things that loosen up. Maybe we have to have smaller lot sizes for single family. Maybe we have to have developers who come up with restrictive covenants that aren't so restrictive, that guys like Kelly can build on, where you don't force those costs to the $210 to the $230 a square foot, that so many instances they are. Private businesses, what can they do? Certainly wages, down payment assistance. We see some of our major employers in Sioux Falls, and they really need people coming here. Maybe the major employers need to step up and work with people in this room and the Housing Authority, Mark, and come up with an idea about how they can house their employees so they have a place to come when they come and get the job, and then in 6 months or a year, the employer can transition them out to another place. We just have to have ideas from all of you to make sure that we can have affordable housing. Thank you.
Lynn, what can the City of Sioux Falls do to meet the increasing challenges faced by your industry?
Well, certainly one thing we hear a lot about is regulations. And the more regulations that get piled on and the more, we pass all those costs along. You have to as a developer. So anything that gets added to a project just increases the overall cost to the end user. So if we can look at some of those rules and regulations and see if they make sense, and if there are places that we can scale back, certainly understand that we want to have safe housing and those kinds of things as well. But I know that sometimes we've talked to contractors that have said, we're not coming to do business in Sioux Falls. It's just too much. We'd rather just stay out and do business in some of the outlying communities, which is good because they need contractors as well. So I think that's one way that the city of Sioux Falls could do something that wouldn't really be a monetary thing as well. From a private perspective, one of the things that we've been able to work with and access is we are a certified development financial institution, and banks are required to do a certain amount of investing through the Community Reinvestment Act. So when we talked about, when I talked earlier about the lots that we had purchased in the northwest part of town, we were able to approach a very generous local lender, and the interest rate that they gave us to buy that land was at 2%. So there's a lot of lenders in this room that need CRA credit. How can we turn around and maybe work with them to try to figure out how to buy down some of the costs of some of the debts? Because again, that ultimately is just going to save the borrower as well. We also had a partnership a few years ago where we worked with the county where they had taken back some lots because of non-payment of taxes, and they gave those lots to us and we redeveloped them. Well, if you can start out with a free lot, that's extremely helpful. And when we first did those houses, we were probably with those free lots at around $135,000. Well, the lots we're using now are closer to $25,000, and so you add that in right off the top of the bat, plus the increased lumber and all those kinds of things that we've been over the last 4 years, and we're about at that $185,000 range as well. So the lots and having that partnership worked as well. We also, the county's also been very good to us. Whenever we acquire any property, we apply to put it in tax exempt status and take it off the tax rolls. We tell them that short term, we'll plan to get a house on there and put it back on. So they do make their money back and a lot more than that, but it really helps if you're a nonprofit developer. Most of us that are nonprofit developers aren't doing it for the money. We're doing it as more of a community need. In fact, I had no desire to be a developer, but we couldn't find anybody else that would do it. And so ultimately it defaulted back to us, and we have worked through the process.
Kelly, can you answer that same question?
I can. Yeah, I support that. It's just kind of the same challenges for me in hitting price point. If you're not the developer and builder, as she's sharing, it's relatively impossible to get a price point project out there that's available for the consumer in under that $200,000 range, or even $230,000. And I do agree that it's, you know, at the end of the day, the labor part of it, and it's kind of a double-edged sword. Jeff is saying higher wages and would help these people, and I 100% agree. On the flip side, we as the builder are seeing aggressive price increases in our trade partners due to the fact that they're having to increase these wages to keep their staffs. Give or take 40% of a home is actually all wages. By the time you break it down from your plumber, your electrician, your framer, so as the wages increase across the board, it's directly affecting and getting passed on, as they shared, to the end consumer. So, you know, at the end of the day, in my opinion, you're trying to focus on as a group of all of us together is the only thing that I feel we really can control a little bit is that how to get into that land at the right price, as she shared. Getting a land for free, whether that's through a nonprofit or whatever, is the only cost that we can indirectly control. The rest of it is material costs that are relatively fixed, and wages are increasing. They're not decreasing because that works against the ultimate goal. So.
Carl, I have a question for you. As we continue to look at ways to revitalize core neighborhoods, what are the greatest challenges you see to infill and revitalization efforts, specifically with owner-occupied housing?
Well, and I'll address this specifically in dealing with neighborhood revitalization program that the city's run and promoted for the past several years. One of the challenges we see as a nonprofit development entity that partners with the city is that when we go into the whole point of neighborhood revitalization and drawing this affordable housing closer to the core and core neighborhoods, in order to revitalize the neighborhood, we're going to build a house sometimes in less than stellar parts of Sioux Falls. We have a project on our table against the wall over there. We currently have 4 townhouse units for sale on Nesmith behind Jackie's, and they're very nice units. The price is $174,500. They are over 1,500 square foot 3-bedroom units. We have $25,000 in down payment assistance available. The main concern we get from potential buyers in this situation is the neighborhood is a little iffy. That's one of the challenges. I mean, we're doing this to revitalize and stabilize some of our neighborhoods that are not stable. And in order to do that and to make a difference in those neighborhoods, to build quality, affordable housing in those neighborhoods, you are going to sit on your units a little longer because the neighborhood needs those units there to provide that stabilizing factor. So that's one of the challenges we see. You know, other parts of Sioux Falls, this is strictly a construction issue that certainly Brent Tucker knows about. At that same neighborhood, we've got granite underneath the properties all over there. We had an $80,000 change order just to tie into water and sewer. And so there are certain parts of certain core neighborhoods that are very challenging to build in as it is. If you're going into them, Pettigrew Heights is another area that, you know, there are challenges there. We have built houses there. They sold very quickly. A lot of our homes are sold to blue-collar working-class families, and that's who we cater to. The private market can't serve those families presently. Whether it be trade costs, we see trade costs going up too. Part of our homes are subsidized with federal funds that flow through the city and buy down the price on those homes. We couldn't offer them at $175,000 without it. So main challenge though is really for the core neighborhoods, accessing land. We buy homes through the city and tear them down and rebuild new homes on them, but accessing the land at an affordable price. We're paying an extra $8,000 after we tear down the home for the property we might get for $18,000. So, and it's that extra step of demolishing a home before you build. So there are quite a few challenges, but I think the opportunities are great in the core neighborhoods. We have some great core neighborhoods that if we just invest more money in them, I think they could, some of them have seen better times in the past, but I'm sure that they'll take the turn for the better relatively quickly.
Lynn, do you have anything to add for the core neighborhoods?
Yeah. You know, you're dealing with a lot of smaller lots, and so the setbacks can be a challenge on those. A lot of times the frontage on them is only 44 across the front, and that's tough to kind of get a garage or a house in there. So you're struggling with that. The infrastructure in those neighborhoods is old. You have to go in and you have to put in new water and sewer lines typically to the street, so that's not an inexpensive cost. A lot of times when you find those lots, the people that own them want $30,000. So by the time you kind of take all the other factors into it, and like you said, they're not in the best neighborhoods, a lot of times it makes sense to go outside of those neighborhoods and not develop on those as well. There's some policy argument of what fits into a neighborhood. We put a governor's house in a neighborhood a few years ago and got some pushback on whether architecturally it fit into that neighborhood. So that's kind of a decision that people have to make of what do you want that's affordable or not. Some communities have taken some innovative approaches to this. I also sit on the Federal Home Loan Bank's advisory board for Des Moines, and as a part of that, we get to travel to different states and kind of see what they're doing. But Minneapolis recently passed an ordinance where they are going to allow multifamily housing on some of those single residential housing. So you might have, if you had a smaller lot in an infill like that, maybe they would be able to either put a duplex in or go up, several levels and more like a condo. So those are some of the more innovative things others are doing. Again, that's somewhat controversial if you are in a residential neighborhood. Do you now want these? But as you drive through some of our older neighborhoods, it's a mix of apartments and housing anyway. You've got a lot of that where older houses were torn down and now you have apartments as well. And then the last thing that, again, is tiny houses. You hear a lot of it. And whether or not there's a place for those on some of those smaller lots and how would that all work out? And or would it, does that help or hurt the neighborhood? And again, those are some policy decisions.
Jeff, how has housing size and demand changed over the last 5 years to meet the demand of the market?
Well, certainly, I was just reading a study yesterday, and it said that about 65% of the people, the first-time home buyers that are out there right now, are disappointed when they look at an existing house or a new construction house because it doesn't look like the houses on TV. That's a scary proposition. I mean, HGTV, you love to get the HGTV people to come in and say, I know all about housing, but you don't have to help me much because I watch HGTV. But it's a reality. And so for people like Kelly who are building, he has to adapt to that for that first-time home buyer. For those of you that are selling an existing house, think what you're going to have to do. Go home tonight and take a look when you walk in the front door. Then turn on HGTV and see the difference. We need to identify a lot of different things. And I don't know that we have the availability of identifying everything. I talked earlier about the traditional home buyer. They're not out there today. The millennials and the Generation Z have just as much appetite for owning a home as my generation, the boomers did. And they want that. They have debt, but they also have patience, and they'll wait. They'll accumulate a down payment or attempt to, unless they can get somebody else to help them do it, but then they'll get into a house. So as we go through the whole process of thinking of this, we have to think about them and what they're looking for. I've had people come to Sioux Falls and say, we want to live close to downtown because they like what's happening downtown. All of us love to go down on a First Friday. There's lots of stuff going on. But the housing there isn't always the kind of housing people are looking for. If we take a good look, city people, I'm sorry, somewhere along the line, the city has to make a determination. That's why we're all here. The city's called us. That when we look at downtown properties, Pettigrew properties, some of those that have been around a long time, Whittier neighborhood properties, that if I were a landlord and I wanted to do something to make that property better or safer, what am I going to have to do for permits? If I want to make the plumbing a little bit better, how much plumbing am I going to have to do? If I want to do new electrical on a panel, so people weren't dealing with screwing in fuses, or we had availability to do a little bit more, how much am I going to have to go into the walls to get that permit? And it may come back that I'll look at it and say, you know what, safety's a really good thing, but I can't afford safe. We're going to leave it just the way it is. And then we know what happens to that property over the next 5 years or 10 years. We're all in this together, even real estate agents. And the city, the nonprofits, we all have to look and come up with some solutions on this. County governments, we don't have any more options. We're at the point in my estimation, that we have to make it easier for Kelly to build an affordable product. And Carl to be able to build something that's very affordable for people that can't get in. We need industry in this marketplace, as I said before, to help with housing if they want to bring people in. And you're going to hear from Joan and some other people after this. They have some solutions. But we're at the end, in my mind. Not to be overly dramatic. We have to come up with solutions.
Thanks, Jeff. Kelly, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, regarding size and demands and change over the past 5 years, support Jeff 100% as far as consumer expectations, finishes, what they're looking for in a home is only adding more and more cost. And as he said, they're willing to pass on the traditional finishes and wait and, you know, build them in, which obviously keeps driving these costs up as you try to accommodate that demographic need. I do think with the cost of home ownership, or home building, I should say, continuing to increase, I see some of that having to change and go back to some standard finishes to be able to hit this price point. If we're, you know, and what happens is you're going to drive that where you're going to segregating your buyers. You're going to get the ones that are strictly affordability, and they're going to be buying that, and then you're going to get maybe the millennials that are going to, as I believe it was Rich talking about, your immediate price point buyers, your, you know, give or take your $200,000 to $250,000 home, they're going to continue to wait to get what they want, which, as he is stating, is kind of a challenge because then they're not moving out of their existing home to help with that first-time buyer, and it's just going to keep overlapping. So they're definitely the changes that I've been seeing in the market, and the price point continuing to increase, stopping consumers from flipping that house and moving on. 2000, give or take 10, had a lot of people hit good interest rates and buy that $350,000, $400,000 house, and they're not flipping. Therefore, that $250,000 isn't having that price point to advance to, and we're kind of getting a law in there which is slowing down the bottom of the price point as well.
We have some fantastic questions coming in through our Slido app, so thank you all for participating in this discussion. And I'm going to now turn to those questions and ask the panel, are there developers in Sioux Falls that are building single-family homes under $200,000? Lynn?
This might be a better question. Well, I was going to say, well, we are, but not for profit. So when we bought the land in the northwest part of town, I kind of wanted to do a mixture of stick-builts, and I also wanted to do some governor's houses. With our governor's houses, they're 3-bedroom, 2-bath, a 2-car attached garage. We put them on a full foundation, and we put all the appliances in for them. And so they're, other than the yard, they're pretty much move-in ready. And so that's kind of what we have offered. But I wanted to put in some stick-built homes. So last year, I approached several individual builders and said, hey, I have the lot. What would it cost me to have you build maybe just a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, split foyer? And they were all coming in without the lot about $204,000 to $210,000. And I just went, wow, by the time I add the $25,000 for the lot, the holding costs, whatever else we've got, we're not doing affordable anymore. And so we had to back off of that. South Dakota Housing has been really good to work with in that they've changed up a little bit so that the neighborhood doesn't all look the same. We've got some different styles. We've got some narrow lots and changed where the garage comes off and doing some of those kinds of things. But at this point, I don't know that we can afford to do the stick-built, and I don't know of anybody in town that is able to do stick-built under that price point unless you've got some subsidies. And again, our subsidy in the governor's house obviously comes from the fact that it's built in Springfield by prison labor, so it's got some built-in subsidies when you get it.
Yeah, I can jump in on this one. Under 200,000, anybody? There are a few of us that are still able to pull it off, but it's typically on land that we had purchased 8-10 years ago and got it bought right, developed lots at a size small enough to accommodate that. Although with interest and holding costs on that land, that is starting to get to be a very challenging spot. We purchased some property from the
I purchased some property from Sioux Empire Housing, I believe it was like 3 years ago, over on the north, give or take west side of Sioux Falls. Bought the property right, increased the density very aggressively, and I'm still able to get a few products out there as of today. We're putting in 14 homes that will be in that price point of 190 to give or take 220. You're talking a 900 square foot split foyer with a pretty standard 2-stall garage, and I'm literally right now having to change these finishes, as I shared earlier, to just be pretty basic. And but to hit that price point, and that seems to be the overwhelming demand that we continue to get, is can we do 200 or less, 200 or less? You're starting to see a fair amount of contractors work on just slab onlys, so you're not even going into the basement. Unfortunately, it's not a huge cost savings. You're looking at about 8 to 10% is all you really save at the end of the day, but it's significant enough that we are doing that to try to keep it closer to that 200 price point. I think ultimately to achieve that point, I thought about this a lot as last night as I prepared a little bit. The only way that we're going to continue as a community to do that, and I think it even goes to revitalization, I think you're seeing some of the same challenges, is we have to kind of work back, and Rich said earlier, as a city, and trying to figure out our infrastructure plan and committing to kind of designing on a way bigger scale of your developments. It's a large investment for the developer or a group of entities that go purchase the property. You lay it out and you work with the city on trying to get, like if we, with Chris and the vets on their tiny homes, you got to start with a really overall concept on how you get that to fit within the community and how you can do some sheltering from people that maybe don't want that in my backyard. You can start staggering that, and then you got to get the city to maybe tweak their covenants or as far as lot sizes or styles, and become specific to the project. But I think if we all work together, you buy a 20, 30 acre parcel, and that's a lot of holding costs, a lot of infrastructure, but if the ultimate goal is set up accordingly, and you do some tax increment, you know, to help offset pricing, and then we get these nonprofits working together, I think that's the achievable goal. But as far as the location of this property is the challenge, I guess.
I would add too that for us as a nonprofit developer, we have to look at different housing types too, not just single family detached. We can't, it's getting much more difficult to do single family detached housing where we can build a home for under $175,000. That's just for the hard construction costs, so that doesn't add in the land or some other incidental costs. You know, we're looking at townhome, twin home development. We've had great success with the twin home layout, and that shaves just off the construction costs about $30,000 a unit that we're seeing right now. That's a 2-bedroom, 1-bath with a full basement, and the basement's framed up and ready to be finished out by the buyer. And those have been very attractive for the buyers under 80% of median. So that's what we've started to do, is look at alternative housing types other than single-family detached, which has been helpful.
Thank you. Is there a possibility of a program that engages mid-level earners in property investment and provides quality housing for low-income families and individuals? Carl, you want to take that question from the audience?
Would you repeat that
Yes,
again,
I will.
please?
Is there a possibility of a program that engages mid-level earners in property investment and provides quality housing for low-income families and individuals?
Yes, there are. But mid-level, what was the first term, though, that was used in the question? Mid-level?
Mid-level earners?
Mid-level earners. I'm not sure what whoever sent the question in, feel free to let me know what you mean exactly by mid-level earner, but affordable housing, I'm assuming mid-level earners, we're just going to say 120% or less of median. That's what I'm going to assume right now. There aren't nearly as many programs for the mid-level earners to create affordable housing. We do have home funds can go up to 115% of median in some cases. Unfortunately, federal programs for affordable housing are really designed for those earners in those households that they saw as the most in need, which generally fall under 80% of median. And I'm assuming the person posing the question was saying mid-levels above that. So I would say there are limited public federal subsidy programs for middle-income buyers.
Thanks. Lynn, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I would tend to agree with that as well. Most of the programs, as I mentioned earlier, I'm on the Federal Home Loan Bank Board. Almost all their programs are geared toward that 80% or below that. Jeff, you might, I don't know if we're missing anything for other programs, but since my market is really the 80% and below, that tends to be what I'm most well-versed on for types of financial assistance.
If anybody does have an idea for a program, that would be a great thing to write on a Post-it note and place at the back on one of those boards. There is another question that came in. How can the city further incentivize infill development rather than the further sprawl and corresponding infrastructure strains? Kelly, you want to take that one? Or somebody else on the panel?
It's a challenge, as I talked earlier, everything I do is in bulk, and that's the only way I'm able to hit price points. So as far as infill in the city, if I'm understanding the question, there's not the size of the property to be able to accommodate the bulk, and it's not necessarily just in single family. I think as I absorb what I hear in these discussions and in Sioux Empire housing as of last year, the challenge is that we got a lot of caseworkers who are working with people and they'll work on the rental side, and every customer, if you would, or person that is working through these, they prove themselves in the rental market and they're ready for home ownership. And I think the next challenge for that caseworker is that the rental unit was here with their family of four and all their friends and their school and everything they have is this spot, but now that next home is halfway across Sioux Falls and they have no friends, no family support, and they don't even have the desire to take that next step. And that's where I kind of go back to working together in a way bigger scale and thinking ahead and trying to create like almost a community where you can kind of get these guys started in the apartment. The caseworker can work them through their finances and get them step one, go into the tiny homes or the twin homes that are just within that give or take 30-acre radius, tying in some daycare assistance. We talked single family parent was 3/4 of every one of your demands, or as far as your clients looking for a product. Well, that daycare expense is offsetting that $11 wage, and we all know that there's really no point in it. So trying to combine all this into a community would be the challenge. I know I got off track as far as the question, and I don't see it on my level and what I work with, but I think maybe these guys could answer that a little bit better, fill in the info.
Well, I think, the tendency is, and not being in the for-profit development sector presently, I would suggest that it's very difficult for a for-profit developer, as Kelly said earlier, to build in a smaller scale and get the margins that they need to get to really make money. We're not in it. We don't have the margin demands that a for-profit developer might have. In turn, we don't have some of the risks they have either. So there is a trade-off there. So I think it would be very difficult to not see the free market going and sprawling as they go, because that's kind of the way that development trends have been. And without proper public transit or extensive public transit in Sioux Falls, that makes it even more challenging to put affordable housing further and further out from the core, just because we don't really have a good transit infrastructure in place here. And those cities that were built on the car, and Sioux Falls is one of them, you tend to see development trends sprawling rather than focusing on bringing housing in. But a lot of it is the bottom line for the developer too. So
I understand the part about the transportation, Carl, but I believe, Joan, was it 5 or 6 years ago you did was it Westfield? Westwood, which is far southwest. And in the studies that you did, you found, I believe, that almost everybody had a car and that they could get to work from there. Now, more and more people are coming to Sioux Falls, and maybe they have a car, but it's not always the most dependable car. And you do have to go get kids after work, and daycare is a huge part of it. So that infill, the revitalization does become important. I think, though, that for you to do revitalize one property, or tear one down and build it, is, like you said, much easier because of the profit, not needing to be profitable. For somebody else that wanted to do it, you're going to have 4 or 5 or maybe a whole block that you can come in and have some different form of housing, where maybe on that block, instead of 3 or 4 houses or 6 or 8 houses, you're getting 15 or 16 housing units. And that will help revitalize, certainly, and keep the neighborhood.
No, and I agree, and I wasn't making a judgment call, Jeff.
I know.
And presently, you couldn't, really, the vast majority of our residents couldn't live without a car in Sioux Falls because of the way Sioux Falls operates presently, so.
I do have another great question that has come in. Is affordability a construction cost barrier, or is wage growth and other financial underwriting regulations more of a cause for purchasing barriers? Yes, I can say that again. Is affordability a construction cost barrier, or is wage growth and other financial underwriting regulations more of a cause for purchasing barriers?
I'll start with this one if I could. Go ahead. I think wage growth is an issue, but it's not unique to Sioux Falls. I think housing costs are outpacing wage growth throughout the country. I'm seeing most of our lenders are not as restrictive as they were 5 years ago. We're seeing a loosening in the requirements of our lenders, and which we appreciate because I think it's helped quite a few of our buyers. But yeah, what solution there is to wage growth, I'm not absolutely certain, but I do think it goes hand in hand with rising housing costs, which in turn are created by construction costs. So I think it does have a significant factor.
I think it's a combination of both. I don't think you can separate them. Especially if you're with the governor's house where we have to be at 80% or below, that really restricts your buyers and your market. And the increase of that 80% median household income number, which just went from 44,000 to 48,000, is not rising as fast as the cost of construction is rising. So you're recognizing maybe $4,000 a year more that they can make, but maybe you are recognizing in costs somewhere in that $10,000 to $20,000, and so it's not translating. The other thing you have to keep in mind that has really kind of hindered some of the stuff too is as the interest rates go up, that's really having a negative impact on the buyers and those kinds of things as well. Although we market our homes around that 180 range or so, we've had to get creative and go out and get some subsidies to help buy down almost those payments, because that's, depending on how many subsidies you end up layering, that can be a $1,300 a month house payment by the time they're done. And I have no desire to put anybody into a house that we have to foreclose on in just a year or two. So we try to be cognizant of that. Again, South Dakota Housing's been a really good partner. We typically they come in with either a $10,000 or somewhere in that $10,000 to $14,000 range of a grant. So if you take the 180, you take that off the top, they'll take a second on that. That's forgivable over 5 years. When it was 10,000, it was 2,000 a year. So if you sold in year 4, you'd only have to pay back 2,000 of it. The other thing that we did as my organization, I run 3 organizations, and the Southeastern Council of Governments and Dakota Business Finance have given the Southeastern Development Foundation a pool of $150,000. And we've been able to layer that on top as well. So the borrower gets a $10,000 0% loan. It's soft. It's not forgiven, but they only have to repay it if they sell the house or if they try and do a cash out refi. So really what they're taking for a mortgage on a house that they're buying from us is somewhere in that 150 range or so, and that has helped with rising interest rates and with the cost of lumber and stuff going up last year. We were getting a little bit nervous about how long we would hold them, but adding that extra layer of that $10,000 really kind of tipped the scales in our favor.
Great. Well, again, I want to have some time in this session where we can take your input, not just through our Slido app, but if you have a question to pose to our panel, or if you would like to provide a solution or an idea, we do have mics available. I would ask you again to please limit your comments to just a few minutes so that if others want to share, that we have time for that as well. So anybody have a question or a solution that they would like to share? Otherwise, I will go back to, there's some fabulous questions here. Anybody?
Eric Ward, WS Construction. We were talking earlier about different types of construction methods that have gone away. And just got me to thinking a little bit about condos. And I know that there's a lot of things that we run into, difficulties with permitting or whatever you want to say, with condos. And I'm just wondering if that's, if Kelly thinks that maybe is a good option to be able to sell some of these condos for lower, for affordable housing, since it's probably cheaper to build?
Definitely cheaper to build per square foot. The challenge, it's been a while, but the challenge on condos, to my understanding, was financing, is why that kind of faded off, give or take 8-10 years ago. I'm not sure if that has improved or changed. I do know that Signature is trying some of that product again over off of like 85th in Louise area. And I'm not sure of the status, but he does have some out there, and that's the first I've seen built in probably 10 years. So it's I'm kind of watching that just to see if it's a product that'll work, and I'm still concerned on the financing ability of it.
I will say, for affordable housing condos, they are more difficult for buyers to gain financing to purchase condominiums over townhomes. Townhomes, I know code requirements are more expensive to build a townhome, but I would say there's less risk in building an affordable townhome than an affordable condo.
Don't quote me on this, because we had a project that we looked at that were condos at one point. We ended up being able to, and what we were told from the lenders in the room and was you want townhomes because you can get FHA financing for them, and a lot of our buyers need that. They don't have the 20% down. But after the crash and the recession in 2008, I think they really tightened up the lending restrictions on condos. And I think there's a rule that maybe they can't even do any FHA financing until 51% of them are either sold or occupied. And then there's another rule of you can only have so many in the unit, because literally on some of these markets, you had where they were people's second homes and things. You had, whole buildings that were sitting empty after the recession. So I know they've tightened that up. If somebody has more information than that, but really, when you're looking at it, if you're going to build, you want to make sure that you have townhomes. Much easier to sell and finance than if they're traditional condos.
Thank you. Anybody else have a question, comments?
Don't need a mic. Okay. I've been in real estate 35 years, and I was a mortgage banker for 25 of those. And I was one among several people who convinced Fannie Mae to bring 30-year fixed-rate condominium financing to Sioux Falls, and that was back in 1990. Then, around 2000 and in 2008, boom, it all crashed. It got much, much more difficult. But one of the projects the Fannie Mae Foundation was discussing, and this is 20 years ago, were townhomes or condos, however you care to put it, up and down, side by side, fourplexes, where you had your own cube of space, just like you do in a condominium. You had common walls that are much less expensive to build, and they can go on narrow lots with garages detached to the rear. This would work in some of the infill lots where we have alleys, where we access garages as opposed to the front of the home. No one's explored this. I think it's well worth it. We talk about people not being able to afford anything. Well, right now to buy a $192,000 house existing, you need $19.25 an hour under the first-time home buyer program. We don't have that many jobs in that range. We have $12 jobs, we have $20 jobs, we have $30 jobs. We need more construction trades. We need more people that have manufacturing skills. We need people that know how to go into a steel plant and stamp out parts. This may require some employers to partner up with people that are that big bad U word called union. Bad word. Thank you.
Anybody else with a question, comment, solution? We have one up the front.
I will say to that last speaker real quick, we do have Nesmith Townhomes accessed by an alley just behind Jackie's on Nesmith. They're beautiful townhomes too. You should give them a look-see.
Anybody else?
Turned it into a salesman.
Do we have one in the back? Anybody else? Panel, I do have another question for you. Why aren't builders building more medium-sized home, roughly 1,000 square foot? Isn't there a need for them in Sioux Falls?
Yes, there is a need. I build a fair amount of that product myself. I think it goes back to some of the things discussed here again. It's lot availability, just finding the property to buy the lot at the right price, and it's any home under, give or take, 1,200 square feet, if you're not the developer and the builder and even selling some of them yourself direct, the margins are minimal. So when you get the new smaller builders that are growing and trying to grow, their challenges to hit a profit margin, it's minimal for the risks required to make that happen.
Sell them direct, what do you mean?
I don't know.
Carl or Lynn, are you seeing any additional improvements being made on surrounding properties in the following years when you do an infill project?
Well, we do far more, according to Lynn, than they do. I've been here for just over 2 years, so I don't know that I have enough of a track record to say one way or the other. Brent, do you have any info on that? Brent says yes, they do, but I know this, that we used to sell the homes that we build and subsidize the price down. Now we utilize down payment assistance to give a market rate price, and that was specifically to improve the property values in those neighborhoods as well. So we do focus on things more than just introducing the house. We're also focused on raising property values for the neighborhood as well, and what we do.
I don't know that that's any different than any of the neighborhoods we all live in. Somebody paints their house, oh, maybe I should paint mine. Somebody cleans up the backyard, maybe I ought to get on that too. So what's the program where you put all the stuff out in the curb?
Project Nice.
There, that one. Take a look at what happens in the neighborhoods when the city comes around and picks it all up. It's across the city, it's in every neighborhood. When people begin to clean up, fix up, and do that, so do the neighbors. Doesn't matter the price. Sorry. What was that?
I just missed the table.
Well, we have about 4 minutes left in our panel discussion, and so that gives about a minute to each of you. And I would like to know from your perspective, is there any additional things that you would like to add to this conversation, something that we haven't touched on that you feel is important to lift up out of this conversation?
I'll jump in. One of the things when he was talking about employers getting engaged, and he brought up unions, I agree, that's kind of a nasty word in my world, but as far as employers getting engaged, it's something that I'm doing, and I think it's something that all big businesses within reason could entertain, is I'm trying to implement, I guess is the right word, a loyalty program. I got like give or take 60 employees. A lot of them are workforce. They're in that $15 to $20 an hour wage, and I'm having a hard time retaining them. So what I'm doing is trying to put them in housing, and I'm funding and some of that in the front end of it, where I'll finance, take a second out on the mortgage, and I will maybe forgive that after X years of employment. It's something I'm just getting started with my employees, but I do think there's an opportunity there for each employer, because I got to believe you're fighting the same thing I am in turnover or a wage increase, demands, and you just want to keep that one good employee to be there for the next 5 to 10 years.
I think that's a great idea. You think about the hospitals that we have or the banks that we have, and they're all looking for new employees. I heard one time that, it's been several years, that for every 2.5 people that move into a community, you need 1 new housing unit, which tells us that if we have 5,000 people come to Sioux Falls this coming year, we need 2,000 brand-new housing units. Certainly, they're going to be apartments. You'll hear about them next. But that's a big impact. One other thing I want to caution everyone here, is that right now we're on the crux of being, I'll take that back. We are an agricultural community. We can talk about banking, we can talk about hospitals, but we are an agricultural community. Right now, with the rain that's in the fields, the crop insurance deadline's coming up at the end of the month, in the middle of next month, where they'll start to get less insurance if things don't happen. With tariffs, price of soybeans, all of those things will impact what happens for all of our industries, starting in October and November. And whether it's buying machinery, or it's buying cars or pickups, or renting apartments or buying houses, we have to be very cognizant of that. Sorry I took so much time. We've got people down here telling us how much time we have.
That's okay, Jeff. I'll keep it short now. I just want to say one thing, because I'm Director of Affordable Housing Solutions, but also Sioux Falls Housing and Redevelopment Commission. I have to thank our landlords for the commission. We have a ton of housing choice vouchers that program certainly houses many of our communities, excuse me, very poor. We have a lot of people with disabilities, the elderly that are housed through that program. And so I want to thank the landlords that participate with us. We have nearly 1,900 vouchers now. And without the landlord participation, a lot of very low-income families would go without housing. That being said, I'll get to one other point. I've worked in some other areas, and
Got very little time there, Carl. So
reiterate that employers, large employers, I've had partner with nonprofits that I've been with to purchase land to build housing, and that should be an option in the future. Thank you.
One of the things you've seen a lot of in the news lately is the city is putting some money together to buy out those flood houses. And there's going to be some talk of what happens. Are they worth saving? Are they worth demolishing? You've seen Avera in the news with their project and their 4 houses. Sioux Empire Housing did a project many years ago up in the Lacey Park addition with Avera, where they moved a lot of those houses and things. So I think everybody has interest in that, and I think the city's taking a look at, does it work, doesn't it work? And if you build them, do people still want to live in them because they still have tiny closets and those kinds of things? But I think that people are concerned about the core neighborhoods and what happens if you lose this extra housing stock. But quite frankly, right now, I'm not sure where you would put those houses anyway, because for the most part, they're not going to fit on infill lots. They're not going to be able to go into a new development because of the covenants. So as we look overall at trying to save that housing, I think there has to be some realistic expectations of how and if that does work or not.
Wonderful. Well, can you all join me in thanking our panel today?